Welcome, villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, KAGE, the creator and author of all the what-if stories you see on this channel, with your awesome suggestions, of course. I write, edit, and produce every story you hear, so if you're wondering who made it, it's me. I hope you enjoy today's video. Be sure to leave your what-if ideas in the comments and subscribe if you're new. Today's story is, What If Naruto Was in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Part 3. Eve spent a long while on this part and hopefully the next part will come out tomorrow. My views seem to be steady, so if you guys want more parts of this series are on the way. Before we dive in, shout out time. Thanks so much to everyone who comments, keep them coming. And our second shout outs for my Shinobi Patreon members, Omar, Francios Lyman, Alpha Wolf 1993, and Dominic. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon, link in the description. For just $5, you can get early access to full text transcripts, thumbnails, ad-free videos, and updates for my what-ifs. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what-if. Part 3, Reflections on the Path. The defensive city of Omashu. A proud part of the Earth Kingdom, known for its formidable earthbenders and unshakable security. Guard towers lined the walls, their systems built to keep people out, and secrets in. Very few were allowed through its gates. Fewer still could sneak in. And those who were caught, most would never see freedom again. That was the harsh truth in a world ruled by war. And a city like Omashu, protected and self-reliant, had its reasons. Under the bright sun, the group stood just inside its walls, having somehow made it in without incident. Aang had pretended to be the group's grandfather, his disguise more laughable than convincing, but against all odds. It worked. Now they stood at the edge of the Earth Kingdom stronghold. Momo peeked out from the messy wig Aang wore, having curled up inside it during the entry. Aang scratched awkwardly at his new hair as Naruto draped his cloak back over his shoulders. The two stood side by side, gazing out at the city's sprawling landscape, while Katara and Sokka stepped up beside them. Omashu was beautiful in its own way. Its structure was crafted by earthbenders, carved and molded rather than built. Everything had a sturdy elegance to it, firm lines, wide bridges, and towering buildings seamlessly etched from stone. But what held Aang's attention the longest was the mail system. A network of rails and ramps crisscrossed the city. Carts gliding along them like veins through a living body. He smiled at the sight, watching with bright eyes, while the others admired the rest of the city. Naruto hadn't expected to come here, ever, really. But Aang had insisted, and when the Avatar insisted, it usually meant something strange was about to happen. That had become a bit of a pattern. Aang brought them places for reasons he didn't always explain, and chaos usually followed. Naruto didn't mind, he was along for the ride. Eventually, Aang turned to them, grin spreading wide. "Welcome to the city of Omashu," he said proudly. "I used to visit this place to see my friend Bumi," he added, eyes twinkling. "And the best part of this city? The mail system." Naruto, Katara, and Sokka all blinked at him. The awe and wonder on their faces turned to skepticism. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked first, raising a brow. "This place is cool and all, but, the mail system? And what does this have to do with getting to the Northern Water Tribe?" Sokka asked, crossing his arms. Aang brushed that aside with a wave of his hand. "The mail system works with earthbending to send carts up the city, and gravity pulls them back down." "I don't get it," Sokka muttered just as a cart blasted past them on one of the higher rails. Aang smiled wider, turning back toward the tracks. "Bumi showed me how to really use it. Not just for mail. Come on, I'll show you guys." He took off toward another part of the city, moving with excitement only a 12-year-old airbender could have. Sokka looked at Naruto. Naruto said nothing, he just followed. Eventually, he gave a small shrug and gestured for the siblings to follow him after Aang. They arrived at the entrance of one of the massive male chutes, a steep, twisting ramp that bent and swerved through the city's inner systems. A cart already sat at the top, ready to go. That's when Aang explained he wanted to ride it. Just like he used to with Bumi. Naruto crossed his arms as Sokka and Katara hesitated, then climbed in after Aang. "You guys are serious?" Naruto asked, one brow raised. "Come on, it'll be fun," Aang replied cheerfully, while Sokka leaned forward to look down the track. Naruto stepped closer, eyes inspecting the ramp. "You guys should get out of that thing. I really don't feel like dragging one of you out of Omashu with broken bones. You're acting like you couldn't carry us all with your freakishly unexplained strength," Sokka muttered dryly. Naruto blinked. Would it always be him, the responsible one? Before he could ask the universe for an answer, Katara started shifting backward, doubt creeping into her expression. "Maybe Naruto's right, I'm starting to have second thoughts," she began, nerves clearly building. But before she could move, the cart shot down the ramp. Screams echoed behind it. Naruto stood there, arms crossed, eyes wide. Damn, they actually went down. He looked over the edge, watching as the cart barreled along the twisting chute, gaining speed with every second. "When I said Aang should see the world and take things at his own pace, I didn't mean this," he muttered calmly. He sighed, flipping his wrist, "Samahata." The name was soft but deliberate, and the spirit answered. Her form shimmered into existence, shifting from the bracer around his arm to her full length in a flash of chakra. Then, with another quiet whisper, she changed again, flattening out into a sleek, board-like shape meant to ride. "Guess we're taking the ride too, girl," Naruto said with a breath. "Let's keep up, and make sure they don't break their necks." He leapt up, landing on the chute with practiced balance, feet pressing against Samahata's form. One push. And they were off. As he caught up, he spotted his teammates just in time to see another cart slam into theirs, this one loaded with spears. Naruto narrowed his eyes, leaned forward, and made a quick series of hand signs. Wind style, great gust. He inhaled deeply, and with a sharp exhale, a blast of red-tinted wind surged forward, knocking the spears clean out of the air before they could hit. But the chute twisted again, leading straight into another section. Luckily, Aang adjusted the cart just in time, riding it off a building and back onto another part of the track. Naruto watched closely, eyes following the maneuver, before angling Samahata into the air. He sailed over rooftops, civilians gasping as he flew above them, only to disappear just as quickly, a blur of motion and wind. He landed on the same chute his teammates were on and leaned forward again, gaining speed fast. The screams from earlier had faded, replaced by anxious silence as they clung to the cart. Naruto stayed just behind them, watching the turns ahead, keeping pace. It wasn't long before another crash nearly came their way, more carts, more near hits. He acted fast. "Samahata, now." At his call, her scales began to shift, kunai-shaped blades detaching and firing forward. They'd trained this maneuver together, seeing if she could shift and shed parts of herself mid-combat for utility. It wasn't limitless, but it worked well enough. The kunai slammed into the incoming carts, knocking them away and clearing the track. Another turn, a building passed, a wall skimmed by. Naruto activated more chakra, hands moving into familiar signs as he launched smaller bursts of wind and red water chakra to keep obstacles at bay. They crashed through rooftops, bounced off ramps, and nearly got flattened more than once. But he stayed behind them the entire time, guarding, adjusting, calculating. Then came the final stretch. The chute dipped into a sharp descent, leading them straight toward another building. Naruto surged forward, close enough to act. They flew through the stone wall. Naruto and Samahata followed. As they fell, Samahata shifted again, wrapping around his arm in her bracer form. He clapped his hands into a plus-shaped sign. Two shadow clones appeared and instantly grabbed him, hurling him forward under the falling cart before vanishing. He caught the underside of it, chakra flaring in his limbs as he absorbed the impact. The cart slammed down onto another one, a cabbage cart, by the looks of it, and the whole thing crumpled under the weight. They had landed. Aang's wig was destroyed, Sokka and Katara were pale and dizzy, Momo laid on Aang's face, limbs splayed. Naruto didn't even get a chance to breathe before, my cabbages. He blinked, turning to see a frantic man stumbling toward them, clutching at leafy wreckage. "You gonna pay for this," the man shouted. Naruto sighed, and then he looked forward. Omashu guards, lined up, fully armed, they'd surrounded them. Naruto deadpanned, "Why is it always me?" The guards led them through the heavy stone corridors of Omashu, their steps echoing with each turn. Naruto walked at the front, calm as ever, his expression unreadable beneath his hood. Behind him, Aang glanced around nervously. Sokka looked irritated, his arms crossed. Katara stayed silent, but the furrow in her brow said enough. The group was ushered into a grand chamber, circular, vast, and dimly lit by sunlight pouring through a high skylight. Pillars stood on either side, framing the throne at the far end. There, hunched forward and nearly swallowed in folds of green garb, sat the king of Omashu. What little hair he had stuck out wildly from the sides of his head, and his long mustache dangled unevenly. His eyes, though mostly hidden beneath heavy lids, gleamed with something unreadable. Naruto narrowed his own eyes slightly, taking note of every detail. The guards stepped aside, forcing them to their knees with a firm command, "Bow before the king." Sokka grunted in protest, Aang tried to keep smiling, Katara looked between the guards with disdain. Naruto stayed on one knee, not fighting the motion, but watching everything. The king didn't speak. Instead, one of the guards stepped forward and cleared his throat. These four stand accused of multiple crimes against the city of Omashu, vandalism, traveling under false pretenses, and, the guard paused with a sigh, malicious destruction of cabbages. At that, a familiar voice piped up from beside them. "I want their heads," shouted the cabbage merchant, wild-eyed and shaking a leafy stump. "One for each cabbage they destroyed." Naruto raised an eyebrow, tilting his head slightly. This man really loved his cabbages, he almost pitied him, almost. Another guard quickly stepped in, cutting the merchant off. "You'll decide nothing, it is the king's will that matters here." The merchant grumbled but fell silent, bowing. All eyes turned to the king. He seemed to be thinking, his head swaying slightly side to side. A long, tense pause stretched in the chamber. But then, Naruto caught it, just for a second. The king's gaze flicked toward Aang, sharp, knowing. Naruto filed it away. Then the king leaned back and spoke in a gravelly voice. "Throw them." Naruto's body tensed instantly, fingers twitching. Chakra gathering, a feast. The entire group blinked. Even the guards looked confused. Naruto straightened slowly, Sokka's mouth hung open. Katara whispered something in disbelief, and Aang gave a confused laugh. No one knew what to say. Time passed, and the feast began. They were seated at a long table, food stretching out before them. Naruto sat beside Katara, Aang on her other side, with Sokka at the far end. The king had placed himself behind them initially but now loomed near Aang with a crooked grin. Naruto barely touched the food. He sat upright, eyes occasionally flicking to the old man across the table. He wasn't eating either, just watching. There was an angle here, Naruto could feel it. And whatever it was, it revolved around Aang. The king leaned over Aang and muttered, "A lifetime of feasts has made my people fat. I hope you like skinless chicken." Aang smiled sheepishly. "Actually, I'm vegan." The king blinked, shrugged, and grabbed a thigh anyway, turning to Sokka. "Well, you look like you like meat," he said, and with no warning, shoved the entire chicken leg into Sokka's mouth. Sokka froze mid-chew, blinking. But instead of complaining, he just bit down and kept eating. Naruto didn't laugh, neither did Katara. Instead, she leaned closer and whispered under her breath, "I don't think he's all there." Naruto's eyes stayed locked on the king. He nodded. "No, but crazy or not, he's hiding something." The man still had no name, no title had been given, even the guards just called him the king. The king suddenly perked up. "Where are you all from?" he asked, but his eyes never left Aang. Aang quickly answered, Kangaroo Island." Naruto's deadpan was instant, he didn't even try to hide it. The king straightened with a serious expression. "Kangaroo Island." A pause. "It must be pretty hoppin'." The silence was thick, every pair of eyes slowly turned toward Sokka, who let out a single bark of laughter. He looked around. "What, it's a joke," I laughed. The stares continued, Sokka swallowed hard. The king yawned loudly, stretching his arms. "All these jokes are making me sleepy, I think I'll hit the hay." With sudden precision, he flung a chicken leg across the room. Aang caught it effortlessly, with air bending. The guards gasped. Naruto's jaw tightened. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. The king's smirk widened, a few teeth missing from the grin. "Look, boys, we have an airbender in our presence." He stood slowly, arms wide, and not just any airbender, the Avatar. Naruto clenched his fists, chakra already gathering in his legs, ready to leap forward. But Aang beat him to it. He stood up fast. "You're right," he shouted. "You got me, I'm the Avatar, just wanted to check on Omashu, no firebenders here. So we'll just be going now." He looked under the table, then smiled sheepishly, "Yup, clear." He began backing away from the table, motioning for everyone to follow him. "Great job everyone, love each other, don't run with spears." The group started toward the doors, Naruto moving with purpose behind Aang, ready to back him if needed. But two guards stepped into their path, halberds crossed. Katara stepped forward, voice firm, "You can't keep us here, let us leave." The king turned, arms lazily thrown up, sticking up a piece of lettuce. "Lettuce leaf," he said as if he misheard the girl. Sokka blinked, "He's nuts." The king took a few uneven steps and called out, "Tomorrow. The Avatar will face 3 deadly challenges." Gasps rose around the room. "Until then," he continued, "take them to their chambers." One guard raised a hand, "The good one or the bad one?" "The newly refurbished one," said the king. "The one that was bad, but now is good?" the guard asked again. "The one that used to be bad, but now it's the new chamber, honestly," the king muttered, rubbing his forehead. "We really need to number those." Then his voice shifted, pointing casually at Naruto. "Oh, but keep the amber cloak with me, we need to talk." Everyone stopped. Naruto's eyes narrowed, the only sign of his reaction, but Katara, Sokka, and Aang all turned toward him in alarm. "What?" Katara asked, voice rising. 2 guards pulled Naruto back, he didn't resist, yet. The others were ushered out, trying to fight it, trying to look back, but the doors slammed shut with a heavy boom, stone rising over them like a wall. Naruto turned, facing the throne again. His posture was steady, calm. But the fire in his eyes said something different. His muscles were coiled, his stance light and ready. The king stared at him, amused. Naruto stared right back. If he needed to act, he would. Naruto stood in the center of the throne room, the doors sealed behind him with thick stone. Silence filled the space now, just him and the king, who still sat hunched on his throne. Smiling in that offbeat, unreadable way. Naruto didn't waste time. "How'd you know?" he asked plainly. "That I was the amber cloak." The king chuckled, his shoulders rising with a wheezy laugh. "Please, bright blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, weird orange cloak that doesn't match anything else in the world. It's pretty obvious when you think about it. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't respond. The king leaned forward, resting his chin on the back of one gnarled hand. I didn't expect to meet you so soon, or for you to be a child. He grinned again, wild and lopsided. But I suppose of all things you could be, a child was definitely outside the box. He burst out laughing at his own comment, slapping his knee. The echo bounced awkwardly around the chamber. Naruto didn't laugh, he didn't even twitch. This man was full of twists, crazy, yes, but there was a sharpness underneath it, a calculating thread buried inside every word. The king waved a hand lazily. Don't worry about your little team. I only had you pulled away because I wanted a private conversation. Naruto said nothing. I know that look you had in your eye when my guards stepped in, the king added. You were planning to take them out before anything went sideways. Sharp of you, Naruto said, his voice dry, calm, sarcastic, but not unkind. You seem surprisingly perceptive for a guy who is the embodiment of a twist. Flattery won't get you out of this conversation, the king replied with a grin. And as for your friends, they'll be perfectly fine. No one will be harmed, though Aang's little tests might freak them out a bit. Naruto's expression finally shifted, just a touch. He raised a brow, more curious than concerned. You seem real focused on those tests, Naruto muttered, folding his arms. You even called him by his name instead of Avatar. The king's grin faded into a knowing smile. He said nothing. Naruto pressed further. What exactly do these tests do for you? What's your angle? Everyone has a reason, Naruto continued. Even the ones who seem off their rocker. The king actually clapped once. Clearly delighted. Oh, I like you, kid. Smart, not easily fooled, that brain of yours is working even when your mouth's not. Naruto stayed still. But, the king went on, waving a wrinkled hand in a slow arc, what I want from the tests isn't for you to know. That's something you'll have to see for yourself when the time comes. Naruto exhaled through his nose, unimpressed. But that's not even the main reason I brought you here. The king leaned back again, now smiling with a more grounded look. I've heard stories about you, kid. You've been everywhere. Helping people, hurting others, cleaning up the dirt nobody else wants to touch. He scratched his beard with a knuckle. In some ways, you've even helped Omashu. You remember the bandit front near the mountains of Laojiang? Naruto gave a slow nod. Of course he remembered, that entire camp was a pit of filth, slavers who took prisoners from war-torn villages and planned to sell them or kill them once they were spent. He hadn't left a single one breathing, a massacre, a mercy. One of the darker chapters in his life. The king's tone dropped slightly. They'd made plans to infiltrate Omashu's outer walls. While we could have repelled them, you saved us the effort, whether you meant to or not. Naruto's voice came low. So what does that have to do with now? He stepped forward once. Why are you testing Aang? What do you want with me? The king looked amused again, but his tone sharpened. What I want is for you not to interfere with the tests. Naruto's gaze narrowed. They're important, to Aang, to who he's supposed to become. Naruto thought for a long second, it didn't sit right. This wasn't about tradition or hospitality. It felt targeted. Is that really it? He asked. Or is there something else you're not saying? The king shrugged dramatically. Maybe, maybe not, but either way, no, I won't explain the tests. And no, I won't tell you why I'm doing them. He grinned, let's just call it, a life lesson, for both of you. Naruto rolled his eyes. You're really making it hard not to punch someone. You know that? The king laughed again, that's the spirit, but hold on, I'm not finished. He suddenly stood, bones creaking as he straightened. You're not to try escaping, not until the challenges are complete. And what makes you think I'd even try? Because you care, the king replied, now pacing slowly around the edge of the room. Because I can see the way you watch your team. You've got that, protect at all costs look. So, to keep things simple. He gestured around the throne room. Let's just say I've added a little incentive, neither you nor Aang will want to test me on it. Naruto stayed silent, but the tension in his posture grew. Whatever the king had done, or threatened to do, he meant it. And Naruto didn't want to find out the cost of pushing back. Oh, and one last thing, the king said, turning with a grin. You and I are going to have a little spar. Naruto blinked. His face stayed neutral, but the confusion was clear in his eyes. What? A light spar, the king said, clapping his hands. I haven't had a proper warm-up in years. And the amber cloak, well, let's just say I've always wanted to see what the stories were all about. Naruto's eyes narrowed again. You want to fight me? The king nodded. One hit, that's all it takes, friendly match, no killing, no maiming, just a clean strike to end it. Naruto stared for a moment longer, then asked flatly, You're serious? I am, the king declared. But, no spirits. I know all about your little companion. His eyes drifted to the thin, bracelet-like form wrapped around Naruto's wrist. She stays out of it. Naruto's eyes barely widened, but internally, he reeled. The king knew about Samahata. He recognized her, even in her most minimal form. No one was supposed to. This man is dangerous. The act, the antics, the jokes, all a cover, or maybe not a cover, but only part of him. The other part, sharp, intelligent, possibly brilliant. This was no fool. Naruto studied him carefully, then asked one final question, his voice quiet but firm. Is this really just a spar? The king nodded. It is, one that ends with one solid blow, and neither of us gets to go all out. That's the rule. Naruto exhaled slowly, his stance relaxing only slightly. This man was stranger than anyone he'd met since entering this world. And far more dangerous than he let on. Still, he wasn't afraid. If anything, he was curious. Fine, Naruto stood, brushing dust off his cloak as he looked across the throne room toward the old king. So where are we doing this? The king's response was immediate, and far too casual. Right here, of course, he beamed. Why wander around the castle when I've already got everything I need? Before Naruto could respond, the king stomped the ground. The feast table and all its chairs sank into the floor, as if the earth itself swallowed them. In seconds, the throne room became a wide, open battlefield of polished stone. Then the king removed his crown. He unclasped his royal robes, letting them fall in a pile beside the throne. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. The frail, hunched figure he'd seen only minutes ago now straightened, his back cracking loudly as he stood to full height. What was left beneath the robe wasn't royal silk or finery. Just a pair of practical earthbender shorts and a body carved like old stone, muscles thick and hardened by time. Naruto blinked. We're really doing this here? The king rolled his shoulders, grinning. Everything in this room is earth, so if we break anything, he stomped once. A slab behind him smoothing itself, I'll just fix it. Naruto gave a short nod, body easing into his ready stance. This wasn't an all-out battle, so he'd stick to earth style only. Limit himself, no Samahata, no clones, no elemental mix. A real spar. The king pointed at him suddenly. We start now. He slammed his hand into the floor. The earth rippled, then shifted to sand. Naruto's eyes widened as the floor beneath his feet liquefied. He jumped just before it sank him in, only for the sand to shoot up after him in a thick, spiraling column. Fast. Naruto flashed through hand signs midair. Earth style, earth wall. A stone platform rose beneath him, slamming into the column and stopping the sand's momentum. But Naruto didn't wait, he launched off the wall, rocketing toward the king with a chakra-boosted dash. The king responded instantly, sending a second wave of sand after him, this time shaping it into spikes, sharp and twisting upward like drills. Naruto flipped in the air, twisting over them, landing on his feet several meters from the king. His cloak settled. Eyes sharp, breath calm. This fighting style, it was wild, unpredictable. Twisting earth into flowing forms, reshaping it faster than most benders Naruto had seen, outside of Toph. The king wasn't just powerful, he was adaptable. And with the entire room made of earth, it was like watching a predator move in water. This is one of those fights, Naruto thought. Even in a spar, I might actually lose. He didn't fear it, he didn't flinch, if anything, his heart was finally beating faster with something close to interest. Excitement. He weaved a new set of signs, earth style, fissure. Naruto slammed his fist into the ground. The floor cracked, deep, jagged fractures racing forward in branching lines toward the king. The old king moved with unexpected speed, sliding to the side as one of the cracks erupted just beside his foot. But when he tried to close the earth behind him, he scowled slightly. Couldn't bend it back. He barely had time to think before Naruto closed in again. The king hurled a boulder, Naruto ducked under it. Then came rising pillars, thick and sudden. Naruto weaved between them, chakra guiding every motion, and then he slammed 3 quick signs. Earth style, earth bullet. From his mouth came a fast, concentrated sphere of compressed earth. The king raised a hand and caught it, then dropped it, barely phased. Behind Naruto, the ground shifted again. It rumbled. Naruto's eyes snapped open as a massive boulder, formed from the entire back wall, rose and launched toward him from behind. He landed, turned, hand signs already forming. Earth style, stone saw. Earth erupted around his forearm, swirling into a circular spinning blade. He slashed it forward, cleaving the boulder in two. The halves soared past him, crashing behind, right back toward the king. The king smirked and bended them harmlessly away, returning them into the floor as if rewinding the earth's clock. He dived into the ground a moment later. Naruto barely blocked the strike as the king popped up in front of him. The king vanished again. Over and over, strike, vanish, strike, the king kept darting through the floor like a mole on caffeine. Naruto's patience began to wear thin. He formed hand signs again. Earth style, shockwave. He slammed his fist down. Earth surged up his arm, out through his palm, and detonated in a wide radius. The ground rippled with a heavy quake, and the king burst out of the floor, forced into the open. He landed several feet behind Naruto. Naruto turned, one eyebrow lifted, the faintest smirk forming, impressed, maybe. The king didn't speak, he just raised his hand. The 2 massive boulder halves Naruto had cleaved before lifted again, slammed together into one, then flattened into a wall spanning the width of the room. It rushed forward, fast, wide, unstoppable. Naruto's calm finally cracked. He had nowhere to move, the room was shrinking under it. No walls to run across. No air to jump into, no jutsu fast enough, and then, it stopped. The wall halted inches from Naruto's face. With a slow wave of his hand, the king lowered the stone back into the floor. "I win," the king said simply. Naruto stood still for a moment, breathing slow. "You weren't kidding," he finally said. The king stepped forward again, wiping his hands together. "Told you it was just one hit. Or in this case, no hits, but you'd have been flatter than a steamed dumpling if that wall hit you." Naruto didn't respond right away. His thoughts spun, not in panic, but with realization. Even if this had been real, even if he'd used clones, wind, water, fire, or Samahata, he wasn't sure he would have won. Not here, not against this. And this was the man holding back. The king clapped his hands. You're good, kid, fast, adaptive, strong. But I've been fighting longer than you've been alive. Naruto finally gave a faint chuckle, that's fair. Then his voice turned quiet again. If that attack had kept going, I might have died. The king grinned. Good thing I'm in a good mood today. Naruto just stared, heart steady, pulse slow, but for the first time in a while. He felt outmatched. And he kind of liked it. Naruto shook his head, exhaling quietly. So, that's all this was about? The king gave a slow nod, brushing stone dust off his palms. I wanted to see why the amber cloak was considered so dangerous, the old king said. Now I see why. He gestured toward the scarred floor. Still crackling faintly from Naruto's last jutsu. But you've got problems of your own. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Do I? The king pointed at him, eyes sharp despite the casual tone. Your fighting style, it's reactive. Fast, counter-heavy, designed to adapt, not dominate. He paused. That's because you don't control the environment the way a bender does. Naruto didn't answer, he didn't need to. You're not a bender at all, are you? Naruto was tired of being surprised by this man. The king had dissected his technique in mere minutes. There was no point pretending. So he just gave a small nod. The king chuckled. Don't look so annoyed, I've been around a long time, you learn to read people. Then his tone shifted again, more curious now, chakra. Naruto's fingers twitched at the name. I've studied what I could, the king continued. Most people haven't even heard of it anymore. But if you search the forgotten places, dig deep enough into the old tales, remnants remain. His eyes didn't leave Naruto. And from what I've seen, you weren't born using it, were you? You were taught. By a bender maybe, then taught yourself the rest. Naruto didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. The king let out a hum. See, that's the issue, you're shaping your techniques like a bender would. Trying to compensate for something you were never meant to have. He circled slowly around Naruto now, speaking like a mentor dissecting a student's training flaws. Your jutsu, your chakra, it's programmed. Not reactive. You don't shape the element the way I do. You command it, fire and release, hit or miss. For a bender, that's a flaw, but for you? He stopped, tapping the side of his own head. It's an advantage, you can design attacks ahead of time. Build complexity, use precision. He pointed back to where Naruto's saw had sliced through the boulder. Like that, that was clever. The saw, it was sharp, efficient. But it was just a taste of what you're capable of. Naruto stayed quiet, still, but inside, something shifted, and I'd wager, the king went on, you're not limited to Earth either. Rumor says you've been seen using white fire. Naruto's eyes darkened, not in a while. That answer held weight. The king didn't pry, only nodded with understanding. Fair enough. But let me tell you something, bending is versatile because of shape, we mold our elements. Chakra, you've got a whole other advantage. You can design your attacks. Shapes, functions, effects. Think beyond benders, beyond shape, make something we couldn't. Have you ever tried making an earth technique that absorbs earth, instead of moving it? Naruto glanced down at his hand, slowly curling his fingers. Have you ever tried bending aspects of the elements? The king continued. Sure, fire will always be hot, earth will always be solid, but how far can you push that, what can't you do? He grinned, that's the tricks, stay out of the box. Naruto's eyes lingered on his palm, brows low. Was that it? Had he been limiting himself, trying to bend like a bender instead of creating like a chakra user? It made sense, even with how strong he was, how capable he was, a small part felt like his elements were incomplete. Like he was following someone else's rules instead of writing his own. He'd thought it was a problem of power. Maybe it was a problem of mindset. Before Naruto could say anything, the king turned, casually waving his hand. Well, that's enough talk, you're free to return to your corridor, a guard will fetch you soon. Get some rest, tomorrow's going to be interesting. The king strode toward a side hall, already humming some strange tune. Naruto didn't stop him. He just stood in that quiet, stone chamber, staring at the lines in his palm. Stay out of the box. Naruto sat quietly in the chamber after the king left, his fingers pressed lightly against the cool stone beneath him. The silence felt heavier now. He let his eyes drift closed, replaying the fight, every shift of stone, every change in tempo, every moment where his instincts were half a second too late. His thoughts drifted back to what the king had said. About fighting like a bender. About limitations. Why had he been using jutsu like bending? The answer came to him quicker than he liked. Because that's how he was taught. His major teachings, the foundation of his understanding, came from one. It made sense now, one had based his movements and strategies around bending because that's what he knew, that's what he was. And Naruto had learned from that, inherited it. But now it was obvious that it had boxed him in. His mind wandered back to something Aang had asked at the Southern Air Temple, when they were still trying to understand each other. If you were to go up against a really strong bender, would you lose? Nah. I'd win. Naruto remembered saying that with certainty. And it wasn't that he doubted it now, he would win, against most benders, even strong ones. But today had shown him something new. He wasn't just going to be facing strong benders. The 100-year war had turned bending into an art sharpened by necessity. There were prodigies now, legends in the making. People like Toph, who he had once trained against and at best managed to tie with. She wouldn't be the same when he found her again, she wouldn't have stopped training just because he left. She would have grown, evolved. He wasn't going to be fighting the strong. He'd be facing the elite. Benders like the king, who weren't just powerful, but unorthodox, unpredictable. People who didn't bend their element, they commanded it, they played with it, there was no box to confine them. His thoughts on Kyoshi Island had told him training was needed, but this fight, this made it clear. He couldn't just keep training, he needed to break out. He needed to stop thinking like a bender entirely. And start thinking like himself. The next morning came quickly. Naruto was awoken by the quiet knock of a guard. No words, just a nod. He followed the man into a new chamber, wide, damp, echoing. A shallow cave with stone steps and a waterfall off to the side, the sound filled the space like a heartbeat. The others were already there. Sokka and Katara stood stiffly, encased from the waist up in dull green crystal. Naruto recognized it immediately. Genomite rings. Creeping crystal. He'd seen it once before in the eastern passes. Dangerous stuff, grew faster than vines if left unchecked. By nightfall, they'd be sealed in completely. The only reason Naruto wasn't wearing one was simple, he'd promised not to interfere. Now he understood why the king made him swear it. It was leverage. Naruto stood near Aang, arms crossed, body still relaxed, but his eyes were locked on the king. He hated this. But he also knew something now he hadn't before, the king wasn't doing this out of cruelty. He was trying to teach Aang something. Just like the fight had tried to teach him. The first test began without ceremony. Aang had to retrieve a key, the key to his friend's freedom, from the waterfall. It hung suspended on a chain, right in the dead center of the roaring current. Aang made the first attempt by rushing forward, trying to climb the slick ladder that led into the wall. The water shoved him back effortlessly. Then he switched tactics. Bouncing off stalagmites, he tried diving in from above. No better. It wasn't until he broke off one of the spires and threw it, guiding it with air bending through the waterfall, that he finally got the key. The stone spear slipped through a momentary gap, grabbing the chain and swinging the key right into the air above the king's throne. Naruto saw the moment Aang's expression turned serious. "Now free them," the boy demanded. Soaked and firm. But the king only chuckled. "2 more challenges, remember?" Naruto didn't even bother sighing. Of course it wasn't going to be that easy. The next test brought them to a different part of the palace, shaped like a miniature forest. Aang dropped in, immediately spotting what looked like a rabbit. He gave chase, until a monstrous beast came barreling out from the trees, floppy ears and all. The rabbit darted into a hole. Aang turned just in time to catch the beast mid-leap, and only then did the truth hit him. Flopsy wasn't the rabbit. Flopsy was the beast. Naruto kept his arms folded, leaning against a wall while watching from the upper ledge with the guards. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. He could see the pattern now. These weren't just tests of strength or speed. They were out of the box. Just like the fight had been. Each one forced Aang to adapt, to think differently, to read the situation for what it really was, not what it appeared to be. And that's when Naruto understood. These tests weren't just challenges. They were lessons. Ones Aang needed. And if they were meant to teach him something, then Naruto couldn't interfere. As much as he hated it. Even if it tore at his instincts. He needed to let this play out. By the time they returned to the main chamber, Sokka and Katara were encased in the creeping crystal up to their shoulders. Only their faces remained visible. Their eyes locked onto Aang as he stood once more in front of the king. No more tricks, no more guesses. Just the final trial. "This challenge," the king said, voice echoing off the walls, "is a duel." Naruto blinked, watching carefully as 2 enormous men with jagged weapons stepped out from behind stone pillars. Their arms were scarred, their eyes sharp, neither looked like they'd hesitate to kill. Naruto's eyes narrowed. "What's your game this time, old man?" "You may choose who you fight," the king said, voice as cheerful as ever. "Point to your opponent." Aang looked between the men, both of them gripping their blades. Then, without missing a beat, he turned and pointed to the throne. "I choose you." The entire chamber went still. The king's eyes lit up. "Wrong choice," he said, grinning. He stepped down from the throne and dropped his royal robe. The hunch vanished. His spine straightened. And what remained was not the frail old man they had been speaking to. No, it was the same figure Naruto had faced in the chamber below. Broad-shouldered, muscular, solid. A warrior. Before Aang could even react, the king kicked him off the platform, sending him flying into the battlefield below. Naruto leaned forward just slightly, watching intently. The king jumped down after him, landing with a boom. "You thought I was some fragile old man," he shouted, arms spread wide. "But I'm the most powerful earthbender you'll ever meet." Aang sat up, rubbing the back of his head. Can I fight the guy with the axes instead?" "There are no take-backsies in my kingdom," the king grinned. Naruto stood with his arms crossed, watching the battlefield unfold below. Aang moved like the wind, literally, but the king's attacks weren't slowing down. The king was unpredictable, fierce, and bizarrely joyful in how he fought. The old man bent stone like it was cloth, bending not just with strength but with creativity, strategy. It reminded Naruto of their spar the night before. Just out of his periphery. Sokka's voice broke the moment. "Okay, now that the crazy guy's distracted," Sokka whispered, "can you go ahead and, set us free already?" Naruto didn't even shift his stance, his gaze stayed on the fight, his face unreadable. "No, what do you mean no?" Sokka blinked, his voice raising. "You can totally break us out of this, right? I mean, come on, earthbender or not, you've got those big, glowy, fancy jutsu." Naruto's brow rose slightly as he finally turned to glance at Sokka. "Creeping crystal like this isn't something I can manipulate, sure," Samahata could probably break it down, after a few hours. He gave a brief pause, then looked back to the fight, but there's no point. I'm not interfering. Katara leaned forward, the crystal barely allowing her movement. Not interfering, she echoed. Why not? What did the king say to you when he separated you from us? Naruto was silent for a moment, then answered. He made me promise not to get involved with the trials, not to trash the palace, and not to free you too until everything was over. Sokka scoffed, that's convenient. He gave me his word you wouldn't be harmed, Naruto added. Scared, maybe, but not hurt. If things get bad, Samahata will free you, but I doubt it'll come to that. Katara's voice lowered, serious, but, why agree to that? Naruto glanced at her, think about the tests, none of them have been what anyone expected. Not the lunchbox, not the monster pet, not this duel. They weren't just random nonsense, each one was teaching Aang something. He let the thought hang, watching the battle. I don't know what exactly, he admitted. But it's something important, something even I had to learn. Katara's brow creased, what do you mean? Naruto finally turned fully to her. The king challenged me, a spar, he wanted to understand who I was, how I fought. And when it was over, he taught me something. He paused, then smiled gently, calm as ever. You just have to trust Aang. Katara took a breath, her expression softening. If this really is to help Aang grow, then I understand. Naruto gave a small nod at that. Sokka, meanwhile, had no such peace. Well, I don't understand, he barked. I want out of this crystal. Now, the green crystal had reached over his eyes. I can't even see. Naruto chuckled under his breath and looked back down toward the duel, arms still folded. His expression changed slightly, nostalgic, maybe, reflective. The king had known things about him, about the amber cloak. About Samahata, about the bandits, and, he'd been right about more than Naruto wanted to admit. Does he know about? Naruto cut off the thought, no, don't go there. He let it fade and focused on the match. Down below, the king hurled boulders at Aang, who was dodging left and right, using bursts of air to evade. The old man cackled, praising Aang for his typical tactics. Evade and dodge, just like a classic AirBender, the king called. But the avatar should be less predictable. He stomped again, launching another boulder, which Aang avoided in the air, but it smashed into the ceiling. Debris fell, shaking Aang's balance, forcing him to drop. Naruto narrowed his eyes, he's pushing him to fight back. Aang ran in, but the king stomped in rhythm, raising unpredictable pillars in Aang's path, making him stumble. You'll have to be more creative than that, the king grinned. Aang rode the wall with an air scooter, then blasted a gust forward, but the king raised a wall and rode it like a surfboard, bending the stone beneath it and launching a wave that slapped Aang into the air. Damn, Naruto muttered. Still holding back, though. Katara looked to him, you think he's trying to get Aang to fight? Naruto nodded slightly, he's not just testing his power, he's testing his intent. Aang's always avoided conflict, but he won't have that luxury in a real war. But, will Aang even fight back? Katara asked, worried. Sokka mumbled from the side, I still can't see what's happening. Naruto said nothing, just watched, until he noticed Aang's body language change. There was a shift. He was about to do something. Aang charged again, but the king turned the ground beneath him into sand, tripping him. Two massive boulders bent in from opposite sides. Naruto tensed, until Aang launched himself out from between them at the last second, flipped, and used his staff to send a sudden slash of air that cracked against the king's chest and knocked him back. The king grinned, even as he hit the stone. Then, suddenly, the two boulders behind Aang surged forward, the king had bent them even while recovering. Aang barely flipped over them, and they slammed into each other, only to crumble, the king had softened them last second. Then the king widened his stance, pulling back a fist and raising a palm. It looked strained, intentional. Cracks formed in the stone all around the arena. He stomped hard, then shot his arms into the air, and the entire stand the group was sitting on ripped out of the wall, rising into the air like a monolith. Aang's eyes widened. He spun rapidly, using his staff to create a powerful tornado. The wind pulled the massive stone in, and hurled it. The king split it apart at the last second. But Aang was already there. He landed in front of the king, staff aimed at his neck. The king looked down at the wooden edge. He smiled. "Well done, Avatar," the king said softly. "You fight with much fire in your heart." He then dropped into the earth, tunneling over, and burst up in front of the others. Aang floated up behind him. "You've passed all of my tests," the king said, arms behind his back. "Now, you must answer one question." Aang blinked. "That's not fair, you said once we were done, you'd free them." "Oh, I will," the king chuckled. "But what's the point in a test if you didn't learn anything?" Naruto silently agreed, of course he'd pull this. "Answer one question," the king said. "And your friends go free." He leaned in, whispering dramatically. "What is my name?" Aang blinked, so did Katara and Sokka. Naruto didn't flinch. At this point, he expected nothing else. The king strolled off casually. Aang turned to the others, baffled. "How am I supposed to know that?" Katara urged. "Think about the tests, they had to mean something." "I got it." Everyone looked to Sokka. "He's an earthbender, right, Rocky, you know, because of all the rocks." Katara gave him a flat look. "That's a good guess, but let's keep trying." Naruto looked at Aang. "What did you learn from the tests? What was the point?" Aang furrowed his brow. "Each test was strange, out of the box. I had to think differently, react differently. I had to stop looking at things the way normal people do." He trailed off. Then his eyes widened. He grinned. "I know his name." They returned to the throne room. Aang walked up with confidence, standing tall. "I solved the question," he said. "The same way I solved the challenges. Like you said a long time ago, I had to open my mind to the possibilities." The king burst into a goofy snorting laugh that made Aang laugh too. "Bummy," Aang said, beaming. "You're a mad genius." He rushed forward and hugged the king. Bummy returned it warmly. "It's good to see you, Aang. You haven't changed a bit, literally." Naruto blinked. "Wait, Bummy?" He stepped forward. "You mean the friend you mentioned, back when we rode those mail chutes?" Aang nodded. "That's him." Naruto gave a dry laugh. "Huh, that's ironic." He rubbed his forehead. "And I thought I was done being surprised today." "Less talking, more freeing," Sokka cried. "It's almost covered my mouth." Naruto turned and realized the crystal had crept all the way up. He and Aang both looked back to Bummy. The king grinned, raised a hand, and then shattered the crystals with a flick of his fingers. He caught a chunk in his hand. "Genomite is rock candy," he said, popping it into his mouth. "Delicious." Sokka stared. "You're all insane." Katara looked at Bummy. "So the crazy king was your old friend?" "Who you calling old?" Bummy asked, then deadpanned. "Okay, I'm old." Katara continued. "Why go through all of this instead of just telling Aang who you were?" Bummy held up a finger. "First off, it's fun messing with people." Aang chuckled. "But more importantly," Bummy turned serious. "You have a difficult task ahead, Aang. You must restore balance by defeating Fire Lord Ozai. And when that moment comes, I hope you'll think like a mad genius." Aang nodded, quietly taking it in. The group was soon sent off, smiles on their faces, shoulders lighter. Naruto walked beside Aang as they stepped through the palace halls. The wind was cooler here, softer, Crazy to think this all started because we did something Bumi would do, Aang said. You have to admit, Naruto replied, smiling faintly, it was pretty fun. But even as he smiled, his thoughts wandered back. Oh Zai. That was the goal. Beat him, end the war. Naruto looked forward again, hands deep in his cloak pockets, the breeze brushing past his bangs. We've got this, he thought. We've got it in the bag. A few days later, the team found rest in a quiet forest clearing. Trees rose like silent watchers around them, their trunks circling a flat slab of stone where they'd set up camp. The midday light filtered through the canopy in fading beams, soft and drowsy. It was calm, quiet, peaceful in the kind of way that rarely lasted long on the road. Naruto knelt by a bubbling pot at the center of camp, white flames licking gently beneath it. Samahata lay curled beside him in her compact form, the jagged maw of her mouth stretched in something close to a lazy grin. He stirred with practiced rhythm, calm, steady, swift enough to mix the flavors but not so rushed that it disturbed the atmosphere. The smell was already spreading through the camp, rich and savory, drawing interest from the others. Especially Sokka. When's it gonna be ready? The boy groaned, dragging out the words like they were pain. Naruto didn't need to look to know Sokka was now hovering directly over his shoulder, peering into the pot with hungry eyes. He chuckled, low and light. Cooking for the group was something he quietly enjoyed, maybe even found comfort in, but Sokka's constant dramatics made it entertaining. Just need to make the rice, Naruto said, giving the pot one final stir. Then we eat. The smell was growing richer now, the steam wafting into the open air like a promise. So, what exactly are you making? Katara asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Naruto glanced at her over his shoulder. Seal curry, he said simply, with rice on the side. Aang's getting tofu curry. But, Naruto added, his tone casual but pointed, I'll need more ingredients soon. Running low on herbs and spices. Aang blinked, didn't you pack enough? Naruto gave a half smile, eyes on the pot. I haven't packed anything since we left the south. He gave the curry a soft swirl with his ladle, the broth thickening now. Most of what I had was meant for just one person, lasted a while, until we left Kyoshi. He paused to taste, lifting a small spoon to his lips. Then nodded to himself. I'll have to pack double from now on, he thought, triple maybe. If we keep burning through supplies this fast, we'll end up with a few hungry days before long. Katara leaned in slightly, curiosity written on her face. So, how'd you learn to cook like this anyway? Naruto blinked, as if surprised by the question. She continued, you said you had to learn to survive while wandering. But you never told us how you actually learned. He tilted his head, the corner of his mouth twitching with a thoughtful smile, it's kind of a long story. He turned away for a second, letting his thoughts drift back. Most of it had been trial and error. Nights spent over poorly made fires. Trying to soften wild roots or salvage half-burned fish. He could still remember choking down gritty stew, reminding himself that full was better than flavor. Eventually, he figured it out, what tasted right. What didn't kill him, what kept the cold away on long nights. Just trial and error, he said, finally. Had to eat whatever I made, so, figured out what didn't suck, got better over time. He shrugged, I guess it's kind of my thing now. A mix of experimentation, and a bit of intuition. Aang laughed, sounds like you were born to cook. Naruto let out a chuckle, yeah maybe, but I definitely wasn't born only to cook. His tone held something under the words, a quiet weight. He turned his eyes back to the flames, stirring again in silence. No, definitely not just for cooking. He was the last with chakra, the one who'd survived. Fighting was in his blood, peace was in his heart, but combat still waited at the edge of everything he did. He liked cooking, but it wasn't why he was here. And it never would be. Before he could dwell on it any longer, a thunderous boom cracked across the forest. The sound poured over them like a wave, rattling through the trees and rolling across the sky. It was so loud it nearly blew the fire out, and spilled the contents of the pot. Naruto didn't flinch. But Sokka flailed and cried out, "No!" Naruto blinked, looked down at the curry, and slowly raised an eyebrow. The pot had shifted slightly, but not enough to spill. "Still intact," he murmured, smirking just a little. Sokka sagged to the ground in relief. "Don't do that, I thought I was gonna starve." Naruto's smile faded, his eyes drifted toward the sound. It hadn't been close. But it had been big. He couldn't tell if it was trouble or not, but the sound came again. A deep, rumbling boom that echoed through the trees, followed by the faint shake of the ground beneath them. Aang stood up quickly, alert. "It sounds like it's coming from over there." He pointed toward the right, into the part of the forest they hadn't explored yet. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Another low boom vibrated through the earth like a distant heartbeat. He rose to his feet without another word. "Then we should check it out," he said calmly. "Better for us to know what's out there, than for it to find us first." He reached out to Samahata, who shrunk along his arm until she rested comfortably on his shoulder. She gave a low, grumbling snort, already bristling with interest. Another boom sounded, louder this time. Naruto was already moving, sprinting toward the noise without hesitation. The others followed a beat later. "What about the food?" Sokka called as he ran after them. No one answered. Naruto didn't even look back. They cut through the dense woods, darting between trunks and ducking under branches, until they reached a clearing, a wide, low basin in the earth. A shallow chasm, the ground broken and exposed, scattered with rocks and stone. It was surprisingly beautiful. The stone had a smooth, mineral sheen, and the surrounding trees arched outward like a natural frame. But none of that was what caught their attention. At the center of the space was a boy, roughly Sokka's age, his stance planted firm as he bent a stone nearly as tall as he was. Dust rose with every movement. His clothes were Earth Kingdom style, accented in green around his wrists, ankles, and shoulders. A matching band wrapped across his forehead, holding back long hair that split into two bangs on either side of his face. He hadn't noticed them yet. Katara, however, had definitely noticed him. The others crouched behind a fallen tree trunk, watching in silence. "We should be careful," Sokka muttered, narrowing his eyes. "We don't know who this guy is." Naruto glanced toward the boy, then looked sideways. "Yeah," he said flatly. "I don't think Katara got that part of the plan." They all turned. Katara had already stepped out from behind the trunk, walking straight toward the earthbender without a word. Katara stepped forward into the open space of the chasm, raising a hand with the softest smile she could manage. "Hey, my name is Katara, what's yours?" The boy paused mid-bend, his eyes darted toward her, but he didn't speak. Instead, he ran deeper into the chasm, before slamming his foot down. A thick slab of earth shot up, cutting across the clearing in a swift, practiced motion. Half the chasm was sealed off with a sharp rumble, the gap vanishing like it had never existed. With that the boy disappeared, no words, just silence and dust. Katara blinked, stunned. What was that all about? Naruto came to stand beside her, Samahata still draped on his shoulder like a quiet, scaled shadow. He watched the direction the boy had gone with a neutral gaze, then exhaled slowly. Aang caught up behind them. "Maybe he had somewhere to be," Aang offered, scratching his head. Naruto didn't answer at first, his eyes still tracking the split chasm, his arms slowly crossed. "No," he said at last, voice low with thought. That was instinct, no hesitation. He wasn't just busy, he was worried. Scared, maybe. He crouched briefly, touching the smooth rise of stone the boy had raised. "He's running somewhere, and fast, somewhere close." Naruto straightened. "Might be a village, might be where I can restock ingredients." Katara looked toward the tree line the boy had vanished through, then turned back to him. Then what are we waiting for? She didn't wait for an answer before marching ahead. Sokka groaned, trailing behind the others. Are we just gonna forget about the food you were making? That pot was beautiful. Naruto waved a hand without looking back, already walking. I'll send a shadow clone for it. Food's how we keep moving, wasting it would be the real foolish move. His tone wasn't sharp, but carried that quiet wisdom he only pulled out in rare moments. They followed the boy's path deeper through the forest. The terrain sloped gently downward, and soon, the trees parted to reveal a small Earth Kingdom village nestled in the crook of two hills. It was modest, worn, most of the buildings were made from pale green clay and stone, roofs thatched or tiled with whatever had been available. Smoke drifted from only a few chimneys, chickens scattered at their arrival. But something else caught Naruto's attention more than the structures, the people. He slowed down, his expression unreadable, but his eyes scanned everything, the twitch in a vendor's step, the way a mother held her child a little too tightly, the hush in a group of farmers talking in the corner of a field. No one shouted, no one moved without checking over their shoulder. Even the guards near the gate had their eyes slightly sunken, boots heavy from more than just fatigue. This wasn't just a quiet village. It was a scared one. Naruto said nothing at first, but his body changed, shoulders more alert. Feet quieter. He was observing, feeling the weight in the air that others might miss. Something was off, and whatever it was, it had everyone here wound tighter than a tripwire. The group walked slowly through the village, its worn stone paths etched with years of quiet suffering. Small homes leaned slightly in the wind, their paint faded by sun and soot. People moved in cautious silence, speaking in murmurs or not at all. Eyes turned their way, but only briefly, quick glances followed by bowed heads. No smiles, no waves, just tension. Aang, however, seemed blissfully unaware of the weight in the air. He stopped at a stand and pointed to a strange-looking woven hat. The vendor looked puzzled, but handed it to him regardless. The hat had a wide brim with a slit at the front, perfect for his arrow to poke through. "Hey Sokka, check it out," Aang spun dramatically. Fashion and function. Naruto, walking just behind them, let out a rare, low chuckle. It was a brief warmth in the cold air of the village. But that warmth quickly faded as Katara suddenly broke off from the group. "Katara?" Aang asked, but she was already walking toward a small, clay-walled building near the edge of the path. They followed her in, ducking past the threshold. It was a humble shop, barely more than a room. A few shelves of dried goods and simple tools, but what drew their attention were the two figures inside. A middle-aged woman stood by a counter, and next to her, the boy from earlier. The one who had sealed off the chasm. "Hey, it's you," Katara exclaimed. Stepping closer. "You're that kid we saw." The boy tensed. "You must be thinking of someone else." Naruto raised an eyebrow at the dodge, folding his arms as his eyes subtly scanned Haru's posture. The way he avoided Katara's gaze, the flicker of fear. Aang stepped up beside Katara, chipper as always. "No way, we definitely saw you earthbending earlier." That made the woman's head snap around. Her eyes went wide, alarmed. Naruto's stance shifted just slightly. The woman moved fast, rushing to slam the shop door shut and yank the blinds down. The light dimmed immediately. "They saw you doing what, Haru?" she hissed. "They're crazy," Haru said quickly, hands half raised in denial. "They don't know what they saw. Look at how they're dressed." Naruto let out a quiet breath. "That's a weak excuse, Haru, try harder." His tone was casual, but the sharpness behind his eyes said he wasn't buying the act. "What's so wrong with bending a little earth?" The woman turned to him then, fierce despite her worry. "You don't understand, if they catch him." A knock boomed against the door. It wasn't gentle. Everyone froze. A rough, deep voice barked from outside. Open up, Fire Nation inspection. The woman straightened herself quickly, the fear hardening into performance. Just, act natural, she said to the group, her voice taut. Naruto leaned against the wall. Arms crossed. Katara froze, eyes darting. Sokka straightened his spine in a poor attempt at composure. Aang tried to smile, badly. The door creaked open, a Fire Nation soldier stood there, tall and broad with a crooked smirk. His eyes scanned the room like a wolf sniffing for prey. I already paid my taxes this month, the woman said firmly. That was last month's rate, he said smoothly. Tax just doubled. Doubled, I don't have enough, he cut her off by conjuring a small flame in his palm, letting it dance upward. Wouldn't want any trouble, now would we? He clapped his hands together, extinguishing the fire in a show of intimidation. Naruto's eyes narrowed. His stance hadn't changed, but there was now tension in the air around him. Subtle but growing. The woman trembled, then opened a wooden chest in the corner. It was nearly empty. She handed over what few silver and copper pieces she had. The soldier looked at the coins with a grin. Keep the copper, I'm feeling generous. And with that, he turned and strutted out, not a care in the world. Only once the door closed did Naruto uncross his arms. His voice was low. They're shaking down civilians, forcing loyalty through fear. And no one stopped them. We can't afford to, the woman said, shoulders sagging. They've been here for 5 years, ever since Fire Lord Ozai found coal in our mountains. They use our mines to power their war machines, Haru muttered bitterly. They steal from us, and no one's willing to fight back. Haru, the woman snapped, don't talk like that. Katara stepped forward, clearly moved. But he can help, he's an earthbender, he should fight back. Earthbending is forbidden here, the woman said sharply. It's brought us nothing but pain, he must never use it. Katara's eyes narrowed, that's crazy, it's a part of who he is, just like waterbending is for me, you can't tell him to hide it forever. Naruto nodded slowly. She's right, if you chain who you are, what do you have left? But still, something itched in the back of his mind. He didn't say it out loud, but the mother's fear felt too specific. Too heavy. There had to be more to this. They could take Haru away, the woman said, her voice quivering now. Just like they took his father. The air fell silent. Haru's jaw clenched, but he still didn't meet anyone's gaze. Naruto's eyes didn't waver, that explained the hollow looks on villagers' faces. The thinning population, the fear, the silence. They hadn't just been beaten. They'd been mined dry, the spirit, the power, the earthbenders. Haru was the last one left. The moon had begun its slow climb over the trees by the time the group was ready to rest. The sky, once bright with the fading hues of twilight, now darkened into deep blue and silver, the stars just beginning to peek through. The air was still, heavy with the scent of wood and damp soil from the nearby cliffside. Haru led them through a narrow path away from the heart of the village. It's not much, he said, gesturing ahead to a small hut tucked under the shade of an old tree. But it'll keep you out of the cold. My mom said you can stay here for the night, but you should leave first thing in the morning. His tone was firm, but not unkind. It was clear he was doing what he could, caught somewhere between hospitality and caution. Aang, always trying to lighten the mood, stepped up and smiled. Thanks, don't worry, we'll be gone before sunrise. And I'll make sure Appa doesn't eat all your hay. In the corner, Appa gave a low, contented grunt as he munched through a small stack of dried grass he had discovered beside the hut. A few strands stuck from the side of his mouth like noodles. Aang pointed with a sheepish laugh. Or, at least what's left. Naruto stood slightly off to the side, watching the exchange with a passive expression. His hands were folded behind his back, his posture relaxed. Samahata was resting nearby, coiled in her compact form beside the doorway. He said nothing at first, just let his gaze linger on Katara as she gave Haru a soft smile and quietly stepped beside him. The two of them walked a little down the path, their figures slipping into the line of trees. Naruto's eyes followed them briefly. Something tugged at him, not quite jealousy, not even protectiveness. Just a small, quiet nudge in his chest. Faint. Dismissible. He exhaled through his nose, lips still calm, unreadable. "Don't be stupid," he muttered to himself under his breath, and turned to tend to Samahata's wrappings. The sun dipped low, casting orange streaks over the treetops as the quiet of the village deepened. Haru led the group through a back path, his footsteps quiet, almost hesitant. The boy eventually stopped by a small, worn-down hut nestled between two taller storage sheds. Its straw roof sagged, and the stone walls bore cracks from time and neglect, but it was dry. Out of sight, and far enough from the main path to avoid suspicion. "You can stay here for the night," Haru said, voice quiet. "My mom said it was all right, but she wants you gone by morning." Aang offered a grateful grin. "Thanks, we'll be out before sunrise. I promise not to let Appa eat all your hay." As if on cue, a loud munching came from the other side of the hut, where Appa was enthusiastically devouring a bale. Haru's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything. He looked a little overwhelmed, maybe even uncertain, but not angry. Naruto stood in the doorway as the group began to settle in. His gaze lingered as Katara stepped out beside Haru again. She said something he couldn't hear. And the two started walking away toward the hill just beyond the tree-line. For a moment, something tugged at Naruto, he couldn't name it. A small pull, brief, gone in a blink. He shrugged it off and returned to setting his bedroll near the entrance. He had other things to think about. The sky was darkening to a cool violet when Katara and Haru reached the edge of a quiet ridge. It sloped down into a valley, where the tops of mine shafts could barely be seen in the distance. They sat in silence for a minute before Katara finally spoke. "Sorry," she said, turning slightly toward him. "For earlier, I shouldn't have brought up your father like that." Haru didn't answer at first. He stared out into the distance, his posture stiff, guarded. The wind rustled through the grass at their feet. "No," he said eventually. "You were right." Katara blinked, surprised by how evenly he said it. "You reminded me of him," Haru continued. "That's not a bad thing, earthbending's the only piece of him I have left." Katara's heart softened, she could see it in his eyes, how heavy that absence was. How tightly he held onto what little remained. She knew that kind of weight too well. "My dad taught me everything," Haru went on. "He used to say the earth was like a partner, not a weapon. You have to listen to it before you can shape it. But the day the Fire Nation came, he was one of the first they took." He paused, lips pressed tight, his hands were clenched together on his lap. "We tried to fight back, some of the earthbenders. But they had too many soldiers. Too many weapons. We were outmatched, the others who helped, they vanished. Prisoners, we think, but no one's seen them since." Katara looked down at her hands. "I'm so sorry." She pulled her necklace gently between her fingers, letting it rest in her palm before she held it out to him. "This belonged to my mom," she said quietly. "She died in a Fire Nation raid too, 5 years ago." Haru glanced at it and smiled faintly. "It's beautiful." "Thanks," Katara murmured, her voice tight. "It's the only thing I have left of her. Some days, it's all that reminds me I came from somewhere." They sat in silence again. The breeze was colder now, carrying the scent of smoke from the village hearths. Katara glanced at Haru again, her voice lighter but curious. "You asked me earlier about the people I'm traveling with." Haru turned to her, nodding. She hesitated. He's a kid, but sometimes he forgets that. Sokka's loud, and hungry all the time, but he's good. He's just trying to keep us safe." She paused again, biting her bottom lip before continuing. Naruto's the quiet one, the calm one. He's been wandering longer than the rest of us, way longer. Is that normal? Haru asked. Does it worry you that you don't know more about him? Katara looked down again, thoughtful. It used to. She admitted. He keeps so much to himself. Like there's this whole world in his head we'll never really reach. But the more time I've spent with him, the more I think, that's just how he is. Her thoughts swirled, of Naruto's strength, his stillness, how he always seemed a step ahead, like he was waiting for something only he understood. He's carried a lot, I can see it in his eyes, but he's never let it make him cold. He always looks out for us, even when he pretends not to. She smiled a little. I don't need to know everything to trust someone. Haru looked at her like he wanted to say something, but before he could, a deep boom echoed from the distance, followed by a dull shake in the ground beneath them. Both of them jerked their heads toward the noise. What was that? Katara asked, already standing. Haru didn't answer, he was already moving toward it. They raced through the trees, weaving past dry brush and root-covered ground. The booms had stopped, but there was still smoke curling faintly into the night sky. It didn't take long to find the source, a collapsed entrance to one of the old mines near the edge of the village. A portion of the slope had given way. Broken beams jutted from the mound of rocks like snapped ribs, and loose dirt still crumbled down from above. In the dim light, they saw him, an older man, his arm pinned beneath a heavy slab of rock, shouting hoarsely for help. Help, somebody, please, help. Katara's heart leapt, we have to get him out. She ran forward without thinking, falling to her knees beside the man. His face was pale, dirt streaked across his cheeks. Haru arrived a moment later, eyes darting between the man and the unstable wreckage around them. Stay still, Katara told the man gently. We'll get you free. The man nodded, grimacing as he tried to stay still, breath shallow with pain. Katara turned to Haru, can you lift it? Haru glanced at the rocks, his hands twitching slightly. I can't, if someone sees. Katara stared at him, the panic in her chest rising. He's going to die, Haru, he's trapped. I know. But, if anyone reports me, Katara looked back at the old man, then again at Haru. He was trembling, caught between fear and instinct. She recognized that feeling, she'd lived with it every time she watched Sokka run into danger or Aang face something terrifying. And more lately, every time she watched Naruto walk toward battle without hesitation. Haru, she said, her voice softer now. I know you're scared, but this is who you are, isn't it? He blinked at her. Your father taught you to listen to the earth. To stand your ground. You said earthbending is the only thing that connects you to him. So use it. He looked down at his hands, slowly, his fingers curled into fists. Then he stepped forward. Katara backed up to give him space. Haru drew in a breath, then crouched low, pressing one palm to the ground. The earth shifted with a low rumble. Dust shook loose from the beams as he focused. With a grunt of effort, he raised his arms, and the large slab of stone pinning the man trembled, then lifted. Katara gasped. Haru's form steadied, muscles tense as he held the boulder off the man. She rushed in quickly, grabbing the old man and helping him to his feet. You did it, she beamed, looking back at Haru. But he didn't respond right away. His eyes were locked onto the man they had saved. The old man, though grateful, stared back at Haru with something behind his expression, shock. Fear, something unreadable. You're one of them, the man said slowly, brushing dust from his arms. An earthbender. Haru flinched. Katara's brows furrowed, we saved your life. But the man didn't say anything else. He just nodded stiffly and limped away. Katara stood there for a long moment, watching his figure disappear into the dark. Her stomach sank. Something about that look bothered her. Haru said nothing as they started walking back toward the hut. The morning was quiet, too quiet. Naruto stirred awake beneath the shade of the hut, the soft rustling of wind through trees the only sound at first, until he caught voices just outside. He sat up slowly, stretching. Before slipping his arms through his cloak and stepping out. Aang, Katara, and Sokka stood near the edge of the clearing, their tones hushed but urgent. They took him in the middle of the night, Katara said, fists clenched, shoulders tight. We should have known that man was going to tell someone. We didn't even hear them come, Aang added, guilt seeping into his voice. Naruto frowned, stepping closer. What happened? They got Haru, Sokka answered bluntly. Fire Nation patrols came and dragged him away. We don't know where. Katara's eyes flashed. We have to do something. Naruto folded his arms, gaze flicking from her to Sokka, who now looked directly at him. Look. Naruto, Sokka said, gesturing broadly, I know you're good at sneaking around and shadow walking or whatever, but we don't even know where they took him. We can't just chase soldiers blind, I say we move on. You want to leave him? Katara asked, incredulous. I want us to stay alive, Sokka snapped. Aang stepped forward, Sokka's right, we can't do this like normal, we need a plan. Naruto didn't speak at first, his eyes lingered on Katara. Her posture was tense, but there was no fear in her expression. Just firm resolve. She was angry, and maybe scared, but it was more than that. There was a sharpness in her now, a defiance, like the one she'd shown back at the Southern Water Tribe, but this wasn't just about survival anymore. No, this was justice. That stood out to him. He had seen Katara protective, hopeful, stubborn, but this was different. Quietly, unshakably different. He tilted his head slightly, appraising, You're serious about this? I have to help him, she said. Naruto nodded slowly, turning toward Sokka, then what's the plan? Sokka sighed, clearly still unhappy about it, but relented. Fine, I was already coming up with something so I guess we should just do it. So, there are steam vents outside the mines, hot air comes from the ground through the cracks, we use one. He pulled a rough stick from the dirt and started drawing in it. We find one with a big enough rock over it. Katara pretends to bend, Aang pushes air through the vent from the side, rock lifts, bam, instant fake earthbending. Then the Fire Nation shows up and grabs her, Aang said, visibly unhappy about that part. Naruto's gaze sharpened, and I follow. Sokka nodded, yeah, use your sneaking, track them, find the prison, map the inside. You'll probably only get one shot to break her and Haru out. That means you've got 12 hours from the moment they grab her. 12 hours is more than enough, Naruto said coolly. I'll mark the routes, count guards, and make a clean opening. Katara gave a small smile at that, clearly grateful. Sokka sighed, rubbing his temples. I still think this is insane. Welcome to our lives, Aang muttered, trying to lighten the tension. They all gave a nod, silent agreement passing between them. Naruto's eyes flicked up as movement stirred beyond the trees, 2 Fire Nation guards approaching the mines in the distance. They're coming, he said, voice low and alert. Time to play your parts. Everyone moved fast. Katara stomped over toward Sokka, voice loud and forced. You're such a jerk sometimes, why do you always act like you know everything? Sokka waved his arms in exaggerated frustration. Because maybe I do. You don't even know how to survive out here. The guards glanced toward the commotion. Katara gave the cue with a sharp swing of her arm. Aang crouched low by the vent, twisting his staff and sending a gust through the underground opening. The hot air surged up, pushing the heavy rock on the vent skyward with a loud, abrupt rumble. The guards immediately broke into a run. Earthbender. One of them yelled. That girl's an earthbender. Katara kept the act going with wide eyes and a defiant glare, stepping back as they rushed toward her. Sokka flinched as she was grabbed and bound, but held his tongue. Naruto, perched in the shadows of the tree line, narrowed his eyes and turned. He was already moving, already silent. Already fading into the edges of the world like smoke in wind. And as they took Katara away, he followed, quiet as breath, precise as a blade. This wasn't just about rescuing someone. It was about standing up, again, against what the Fire Nation had made normal. Naruto moved like mist between shadows, his body low to the ground as the Fire Nation soldiers dragged Katara toward the docks. The faint lapping of water mixed with boot steps, but he made no sound of his own. Cloak tucked close, Samahata slung tightly across his back, he remained unseen. A single Fire Nation warship waited at the end of the dock, sleek, dark, ugly. Its hull was etched in sharp lines of iron and crimson, black smoke curling from its stack. The guards boarded with Katara, and Naruto crouched beneath the dock's edge, eyes fixed on the scene. With a faint hum of breath, he stepped onto the water. His sandals touched the surface with a barely visible ripple. Chakra flowed calmly through the soles of his feet, subtle, steady, binding his presence to the surface. He moved beneath the dock, crouched low and watching through the cracks, a silent predator beneath still water. When the warship pulled away from the pier, he followed. Running on water wasn't the hard part. Keeping up without drawing attention was. But Naruto stayed low, close to the waves, his chakra perfectly tempered. The reflection of the ship masked him from view. A shadow cast against the rolling sea. Up above, the low whoosh of wings beat the air, Appa. Aang and Sokka trailed high above the clouds. Tracking from the sky. Good. That gave Naruto full room to move unseen from below. It wasn't a long journey. Soon, the ship slowed. Naruto came to a stop, watching as a massive gray platform emerged from the mist. A prison. Floating, metal, and completely unnatural. It sat like a scar against the sea, no earth, no soil, no stone. Just endless black steel. He narrowed his eyes. A prison made of metal, not just smart, intentional. There'd be no bending here, no strength from the ground. No connection to the element the prisoners called part of themselves. It was thorough, too thorough. Naruto didn't like it. As the ship docked, he waited beneath one of the outer pylons. When the guards led Katara off, he followed their movements closely, letting her path lead his own. Once darkness blanketed the main guard tower, he made his move. He slipped around the outer wall, placing one palm against the cold metal. His chakra slipped through the gaps of the panels, feeling for vibrations, pathways. His fingers moved slowly over the edge until he found a seam, a ventilation shaft no bigger than his arm. He closed his eyes, this'll do. A soft whoosh of movement later, and Naruto was inside. The shaft carried the softest echoes, boots against steel, muttered conversations, the distant rumble of machinery. He followed it for some time, eventually reaching a maintenance hatch overlooking the inner compound. What he saw made him still. The holding cells were few, but barely used. Most of the prisoners, at least 50 of them, lived in a massive open courtyard surrounded by guard towers. No walls, no roofs. Just steel beneath their feet, a sparse number of tents, and Fire Nation eyes watching from every angle. Naruto crouched at the edge of the hatch, his hand resting lightly on Samahata's hilt. The sword gave a low rumble, sensing his tension. He scanned the courtyard again. He saw Katara sitting near the edge of a tent, alone. But it was the people around her that caught more of his attention. They didn't speak, they barely moved. Some were sharpening tools, others simply sat in silence. Faces blank, eyes downcast. No whispers of rebellion, no signs of resistance, no anger, just resignation. Naruto watched as a guard shoved one man for stepping too slow, the prisoner didn't even flinch. He shifted slightly in the vent, adjusting his view, noting everything. Number of guards, 20 on the ground, 6 above. Rotations, every 3 hours, clockwise. Power source, coal. The heart of the prison was fed by a furnace beneath the courtyard. Smoke puffed steadily from a stack in the far corner. Naruto committed every detail to memory, storing it in layers, movement, timing, structure. But even with all that, something else gnawed at him. They've been broken. That was the word, not beaten, broken. Naruto frowned. He'd seen what defeat looked like. This wasn't it. This was what happened when hope was removed piece by piece. And it bothered him more than it should have. His eyes flicked back to Katara. She was here for a reason. He just hoped that their plan would work. Because Naruto had fought enemies before, fire benders, monsters, even spirits. But trying to fight despair? That was harder. And far more dangerous. The moon hung low over the steel prison, its pale light brushing across the towers and casting silver lines over the dark water below. It was quiet, eerily so. The only sounds were distant steps and the steady churn of the furnaces that kept the prison running. Naruto crouched in the shadows near one of the ventilation pipes, eyes scanning the yard. A subtle gesture from the shadows, and Katara joined him, slipping through a gap in the guard's patrol like a whisper. She knelt beside him. This is it? He gave a faint nod. Appa should be circling overhead right about now. Almost on cue, a quiet gust swept in, followed by the low whoosh of glider wings. Appa glided over the prison's upper wall, and the sky bison's massive frame hovered as low as it could. Aang leaned out from his saddle, waving with urgency. Katara, it's time, Aang called in a loud whisper. Where's Haru? Katara's shoulders fell slightly. She looked down, her voice lower than before. He's still here, but he's not coming. What? Aang asked, visibly confused. He's like the others, she said, standing a little straighter but still heavy with the weight of the words. They've given up, all of them, they don't believe there's any hope left. Naruto's gaze shifted toward the far end of the yard. He had seen it in Haru's eyes, the way they drifted, like a boy watching a memory fade instead of living a moment. His eyes narrowed, but not in anger, in understanding. He exhaled, slow and low. Then maybe, he said, they just need a reminder. Sokka, from Appa's saddle, groaned. A reminder? We can't plan a whole prison break, we could barely fake a vent trick to get Katara locked up. And we only have a few hours left, he added, his voice edged with rising frustration. If we stay too long, the risk goes through the roof. We have to leave, now. Katara's eyes burned. We can't leave, not now, I have to help them. Sokka's head dropped into his hands before he looked to Naruto again, desperation in his voice. Naruto, come on, back me up here. But Naruto didn't answer right away. He turned to Katara instead. She looked different now, that same fierce fire in her eyes he'd seen in every fight, but this time it wasn't for defense. It was for others. Strangers. People with no more strength to fight for themselves. This wasn't just her usual courage. This was something new. He nodded slowly. She's right, he said at last. We can't fix everything, but we can start something. Sokka's shoulders slumped. Why is it the 12-year-old is always the wise one? Naruto gave a small laugh. Maybe it's just all the walking. Then he straightened. We don't need to take down the prison, we just need to give them the chance to free themselves, that's it. Aang leaned forward on Appa's saddle. But how? There's no earth here. Naruto pointed up. See the smokestacks? They followed his finger. High above, dark clouds of coal smoke billowed into the sky. Tell me, Aang, Naruto said. What exactly does a place like this burn? Aang blinked. Coal, wait. Coal's made of compressed earth, that's. Naruto nodded. That's your answer. This place is full of earth, just in a different form. Katara's eyes widened. Then if we could just get it to them. Sokka finally sat up straighter. Vents, just like before, when we faked earthbending to get Katara arrested. He started pacing. If we close all the other vents and send a concentrated blast of air through the right one. He pointed to a vent down in the courtyard, just near where many of the prisoners gathered. We can shoot the coal right to the ground. Like an explosion. Enough for them to use. Naruto gave a proud nod. Exactly, but that's only part of it. He crossed his arms. Giving them coal won't guarantee anything, they've been here too long. Some of them might not even remember what real hope feels like. Aang started to raise a hand, then maybe, no, Naruto interrupted gently. It can't be you. Aang blinked, surprised. They don't need a savior, they need their confidence back. Naruto turned, locking eyes with Katara. And I think you're the one to give it to them. Katara hesitated. Me? Naruto offered a shrug and a soft smile. You're already in, you've spoken to them. And since this morning, you've been determined to help Haru, and now these people, that's what matters. Katara's hands clenched slightly, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I don't know if I can. You can, Naruto said, simply. I've seen the way you care, you don't back down when someone needs help. That's all they need, someone who believes they can fight. She looked up at him then, the sincerity in his gaze, the calm confidence behind his words. He wasn't just pushing responsibility onto her. He was trusting her with it. And somehow, that made it easier to carry. She took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, let's do it. Naruto stepped back. Aang, Sokka, you two get to the vent controls, we'll time this right. Sokka groaned, 12 hours, no pressure. Aang grinned, we've done worse. As Appa lifted back into the sky, Katara stood a little taller. And Naruto remained behind, a quiet protector in the dark, ready to move, ready to strike. But most importantly, ready to believe in her. The next day broke slow, with a sky painted in soft blue and streaks of low cloud cover. The metal prison glimmered faintly under the early sun, but the chill in the air carried tension, not just in the guards, but deep within the yard where the earthbenders Saturday. No one noticed the way the vents along the outer towers subtly shifted. No one heard the whir of the grates unlocking, until boom, a loud metallic echo slammed through the yard as coal erupted from the central vent in a blast of soot and black dust, raining down across the ground in a thick wave. Shards of compressed black earth skidded across the floor, kicking up a small cloud of powder that made some of the prisoners flinch. It landed all around them, like a gift from the earth itself. Heads turned, fingers twitched. Still, no one moved. Then, from the smoke, Katara stepped forward. Her voice rang out across the yard, not loud, but clear. You have the power, she said, her eyes locked with those of the nearest prisoners. It's still yours, they only took it because you let them. Some of the men looked down at their hands. Katara took a step closer. I know it's hard, I know they've broken you down, but you are earthbenders, you were born to stand strong, you don't need anyone's permission to fight for yourselves. She turned in place, her voice rising. They took your homes, your families. Your strength. But they can't take your will, not unless you give it up. She waited. But the crowd was silent. No movement, no resistance. Not yet. From across the yard, the warden appeared, shoulders hunched and sneering. Your words are wasted, he spat. They're nothing but animals too afraid to lift a stone. He raised a hand to order the guards, but something crashed down behind him with a thud, sending dust flying. The warden grunted in pain as he was slammed into the metal floor, pinned beneath something heavy. Naruto stood over him, calm, cloak drifting in the wind, Samahata already humming faintly on his back. Interesting opinion, Naruto said flatly. But I've never seen a caged animal look more human than the man holding the keys. Gasps rippled across the yard as Fire Nation guards drew their weapons and began to move in. You shouldn't have shown yourself, one hissed. Naruto rolled his shoulder. You shouldn't have made yourself a target. A wall of fire blasted toward him, but Naruto slid under it, appearing in front of the soldier in a blink. His palm glowed with chakra before he shoved it into the man's gut, launching him back into another. 2 down. A guard on a tower shouted, only to be swept off balance as Appa soared overhead, gliding down from the sky with a deafening roar. Aang dropped from the saddle, spinning his glider mid-air before sending a blast of wind at the tower. It buckled just enough to force the guards to scramble. Sokka dropped down with a yell, swinging his boomerang with wild determination and catching one soldier square on the head before ducking under a fireball. The yard exploded into chaos. Naruto flipped over a pillar of flame, landing in the middle of a group of guards. His movements were precise, controlled, a dance of sharp strikes and jutsu-enhanced agility. He didn't need fire. He didn't need stone. His fists and speed were enough. Katara stayed at the center, her voice still echoing. Fight back, this is your moment. Still, for a second, nothing. Then a single man stepped forward, coal cracked beneath his foot as he knelt and scooped up a chunk. He gripped it tight. And with a cry, he launched it, straight through a guard's armor. It was like the floodgates opened. One by one, the others rose. Men who'd been silent for years began to bend again, lifting coal into their hands, slamming it into the ground, launching chunks into firebenders. Their movements were shaky at first, rusted from disuse, but that didn't matter. They were fighting. And for the first time in years, they believed they could win. The battle ended with the Fire Nation guards overwhelmed, tied down, and stripped of their gear. The Earthbenders, victorious, stood taller than they had in years. Later, 2 of the smaller ships that had belonged to the Fire Nation now floated out at sea, full of newly freed Earthbenders heading home. The sun was starting to fall again as the team watched the ships depart from a safe distance along the coast. Naruto stood just a little off to the side, arms crossed, his expression quiet but thoughtful. He looked toward Katara. She stood apart from the others for a moment, hair gently moving in the wind, a faint smile on her face, tired but proud. That fire was still in her eyes. But there was something else too. Something new. Naruto couldn't quite place it, not at first. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. Her necklace was gone. That familiar pendant she always wore, passed down from her mother, was missing from her neck. Naruto's brow furrowed, just a little. He said nothing yet. But it made him wonder. Appa soared high above the earth, drifting lazily across the afternoon sky. The air was crisp and quiet, sunlight pooling between the clouds as the team continued their journey across the Earth Kingdom, heading northward. It had only been a few days since they helped free the imprisoned Earthbenders, and though the sky was clear, a subtle weight still hung in the air. Naruto lay reclined in Appa's saddle, arms folded behind his head, watching the clouds roll by. Aang sat near the front, guiding Appa with gentle movements. Momo perched comfortably on his shoulder. The lemur flicked its tail now and then, chittering quietly. Katara was close to Naruto and Sokka, her eyes fixed on the rolling white sea of clouds below. Her hand hovered at her neck, fingers brushing the bare skin where something once hung. The pendant. The one from her mother. She didn't frown, but Naruto noticed the way her hand lingered, the way her gaze stayed distant. She was trying not to think about it. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. It must have been during the prison break, he thought. Left behind, or worse, in the hands of the Fire Nation. He wanted to say something. To ease that quiet ache on her face. But the words didn't come, not ones he thought would help. Comfort wasn't something he thought he was particularly good at. Not with things like that. So, instead, he leaned back again, scratching along Samahata's scaled spine. The sword let out a soft grumble, content, and a small smile tugged at Naruto's lips. Then the moment broke. Katara gasped, jerking upright. Sokka sat up immediately, startled. What? What is it? What's wrong? Naruto's eyes were already open and focused, scanning Katara's expression first, then her line of sight. Aang had gasped too, staring wide-eyed below them. Naruto shifted, rose slightly, and peered off the edge of Appa's saddle. Through a break in the clouds, they saw it. A stretch of land, forest once. Now burned into silence. Where green once lived was only bleak gray and brittle black. Ash covered the earth in uneven patches. Trees stood like jagged spears or lay fallen and twisted. Nothing moved. Not wind, not birds, not life. It wasn't scorched, it was erased. The world beneath them looked like it had been wounded. Like a scar no one had cared to heal. Appa landed without much prompting. As his feet touched down, the ash swirled lightly around them. Naruto stepped off first, landing softly and looking around with careful, sharp eyes. This wasn't just fire, he muttered to himself. This was deliberate. He crouched, running a hand through the topsoil of gray and black. Noting how the ground crumbled. Footprints, claw prints, movement in waves. The Fire Nation, Sokka growled, spotting the signs himself. His expression tightened. Of course. Those savages came through here and destroyed all of it, Sokka. Katara cut in quickly, her voice calm but firm. She glanced at Aang, and Sokka followed her eyes. The boy Avatar knelt in the ashes. He wasn't saying anything, just clutching at the charred ground like he could feel its memory in his hands. His head hung low. Quiet. Sokka's rage quieted, replaced with a frown as he straightened and stepped back. Naruto remained still, arms crossing as his gaze stayed locked on Aang. He could already tell. The silence. The stillness. The way the boy breathed. A storm was building inside him, one of guilt. And Naruto already knew the shape of it. This, Aang finally whispered. He let the ash fall from his fingers. It's all my fault. Katara moved closer, her voice soft but steady. None of this is your fault, Aang, you couldn't have known, you couldn't have stopped this. Naruto gave a small nod of agreement but kept watching. Aang's hands trembled. That doesn't change the fact that I wasn't here, I'm the Avatar, I should've. He stopped when a hand settled gently on his shoulder. He looked up. Naruto stood beside him, eyes calm, the faintest of smiles on his face. Trust me. Naruto said quietly, none of what happened here is your fault, not even as the Avatar. You can't carry everything, not alone, the world's too heavy for that. Aang blinked, the tension in his chest loosening, not gone, but lessened. He smiled, faint and full of sorrow, but real. Naruto's hand lingered a moment before he pulled it back. His eyes returned to the ashen field, the wreckage. He'd seen sights like this before, just in different lands. The kind of damage that didn't fade from memory. But for now, they were here, together, and that would have to be enough. Aang sighed, a soft, tired sound that drifted into the ash-filled air. His shoulders slumped forward again as he looked back over the lifeless forest floor. It's not just the forest, he said. It's everything. I'm supposed to be the Avatar, and I have no one to teach me how. Katara turned toward him, brows pinched. That's why we're heading to the North Pole. We'll find you a waterbending teacher, someone who can help you learn what you need to. Aang shook his head, frustration rising in his voice. It's not the same, the Avatar isn't just about learning the elements. It's about protecting people, protecting the world. I'm supposed to know how to do that. He looked down at his hands, but I don't, no one can teach me that. Naruto watched him carefully, a shadow of empathy passing through his eyes. That's not true, he thought. Someone did teach me. The first avatar, no less. His thoughts wandered briefly to Wan, the stories, the lessons, the burdens passed on. I might not be able to train him in all the elements, but maybe I can teach him something better. He didn't say it aloud, not yet. Gyatso said Roku would help me, Aang muttered. Sokka raised an eyebrow, skeptical. And how exactly is a past avatar, who's been dead for over 100 years, supposed to do that? I don't know, Aang admitted, deflating. Before the mood could sink further, an acorn bounced off Aang's chest and plopped into his lap. What was that for? He asked, blinking. Katara didn't answer right away, she just tossed another one at him. To cheer you up. It sure cheered me up, chimed Sokka. Katara threw one at Sokka squarely in the forehead. Hey, Sokka rubbed his head. You deserved it, Katara said flatly, but a small smile tugged at her lips. Naruto chuckled quietly, he knew what those acorns meant. Katara stood and gently knelt beside Aang. They're everywhere, she said softly, motioning to the ash-covered ground. These acorns, they're from the trees. They're buried in the ash now, but they're still here. That means the forest will grow back. It's not gone forever. Aang looked at the acorn in his hands. A slow, quiet smile spread across his face, and Momo perched on his shoulder with a soft chitter, nudging the side of his head. But before Aang could say anything more, they were interrupted by the crunch of approaching footsteps. An old man stood at the edge of the clearing. He was hunched, his clothes earth-toned and travel-worn, but his eyes were alert, sharp, even. He moved with purpose, and his attention was fixed entirely on Aang. Sokka stepped forward first, cautious. Who are you? What do you want? The old man didn't answer him. Instead, his gaze swept Appa, then back to Aang. I saw the bison from afar, had to see it with my own eyes. And now, seeing your arrows, this confirms it. Aang blinked. Confirms what? The man stepped closer. You're the Avatar. Aren't you? There was a pause, a beat of hesitation, before Aang slowly nodded. The man let out a breath. Good, then maybe there's hope after all. Please, you have to help. My village, he stopped himself, shaking his head. It's better if you see for yourself. Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly. There was something about the man's focus, it wasn't greedy or manipulative, but it wasn't casual either. He had come looking specifically for the Avatar. Still, Naruto said nothing. It sounded like just another village in need, and that was exactly the kind of thing they were meant to help with. They followed him. The village wasn't far, medium-sized. Earth Kingdom style. But many of the buildings were partially destroyed, roofs caved in, walls split. It looked like something massive had torn through recently. Naruto walked slightly ahead of the group, eyes scanning everything. He paid attention to the tracks in the dirt, the claw marks on some of the wood, the singe marks on others. Something big did this, but not human. The man led them to the largest building at the back of the village. Inside, multiple groups of people huddled together, families, elders, farmers. All of them looked on as the old man entered with the group in tow. This boy, he announced, is the Avatar. The whispers began immediately, but one man stepped forward with a broad smile and kind eyes. So the rumors were true, he said, giving a respectful bow. It's a great honor to meet you. Aang rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Is there something I can do to help? We're not sure, the man said. But the old man from before stepped in. He is our only chance. Naruto's brow lifted. Only chance. The old man nodded. For the last 3 nights, as the sun sets, a spirit monster has attacked the village. Naruto turned and looked outside. The sun was already low, his frown deepened. A spirit, it had been a long time since he'd seen one that wasn't Samahata. He had already known the spirit world and physical world were separated after he was sealed, but he didn't know why or how. Part of him wondered if it had something to do with Wan. The man's voice cut into his thoughts. He's called Heibai, a black and white spirit. No one knows why he's attacking, but Naruto's eyes snapped back. Heibai, he repeated. Are you sure? The elder blinked at him. Yes, completely sure. Naruto crossed his arms. Heibai was peaceful once. Fierce, but not cruel. Something changed. He didn't voice that. Sokka looked over. Wait, do you know something? Naruto nodded slightly, but said nothing. The old man continued. Each night, Heibai has taken one of our people, just vanished with them. And with the winter solstice approaching. Katara leaned forward. What happens then? Naruto answered. The solstice is when the barrier between the spirit world and our world begins to fade. The closer it gets, the more they blur, until they almost feel like one and the same. Sokka and Katara both looked at him at that, but they didn't question him, at least, not yet. The man finished solemnly. We don't know what will happen when the solstice comes. But Heibai is already tearing through our village. If this continues. Aang swallowed. What do you want me to do? The elder placed a hand on Aang's shoulder. You're the avatar, the bridge between our world and the spirit world. If anyone can help us, it's you. Aang forced a smile. Right, the bridge. Katara took a breath. Then gently pulled Aang aside. Can I talk to you, just for a second? They walked out of earshot, with Sokka and Naruto following behind. Katara spoke first. You don't seem sure about any of this. Aang frowned. That's because I'm not. I've never been to the spirit world. I've never dealt with angry spirits. I don't know what I'm doing. There was a pause. He looked between them with wide eyes. It's not like there's a manual on how to be the avatar. Then Naruto stepped forward, placing a hand on Aang's shoulder. Then maybe it's time someone taught you. Aang blinked. You're saying you'll teach me? Naruto gave a lopsided smile. Luv noticed I'm not exactly normal. Aang hesitated, then laughed a little. I mean, you are pretty weird. Thanks, Naruto said dryly. But I've been journeyed around enough to know a bit about the avatar, as well as spirits. Katara glanced between Naruto and Aang. She didn't say it, but she was quietly impressed, more than that, even grateful. Aang looked thoughtful for a moment, then smiled. Okay, then maybe I do have a teacher. Naruto smirked, ruffling the boy's hair. Not a teacher, a guide. Don't get used to the hair ruffles. The wind over the ruined village was still, unnaturally still. Aang and Naruto stood side by side in the open square, just ahead of the scorched temple ruins. Faint orange hues stretched across the horizon as the last rays of the sun clung to the treetops. Night was coming, and with it, the spirit. Naruto stood calmly, Samahata resting against his shoulder in her large, extended form. The weapon's jagged, organic edges looked like something between a blade and a beast, and she gave off a faint hum, alive and wary. They waited, the silence tense, until Naruto broke it. Spirits aren't like people, he said quietly. They don't think in black and white, or speak in words, most of the time. Aang glanced at him. So, how do we talk to it? Naruto kept his gaze ahead. We don't fight it unless there's no other choice. Spirits aren't just powerful. They're tied to the world in ways we barely understand. If it's acting like this, then something is wrong. We need to connect with it, understand why it's angry. Aang nodded slowly but glanced sideways. You talk like you really know them. Naruto's eyes flicked away for a second. Traveling does that, he said, voice calm but low. You see things most people don't, you survive long enough, you learn things. He didn't elaborate. Aang looked like he wanted to ask more, but something in Naruto's expression told him the questions wouldn't be answered. Instead, Naruto continued, "This spirit, Bei, he's a guardian spirit. I don't know a lot about him, but I do know this isn't who he is. This rage, this destruction, it's not what he was made for." Aang looked at him. Confused, "You've met him before?" Naruto didn't respond at first. He was remembering another forest, long ago, before he was sealed, before he met Wan. He had wandered with Samahata in the darkness, and Bei had come, gentle, watchful, always circling just close enough to ward off lesser spirits. Never spoke, never left him, not until he had to leave. "What happened to you, old friend?" He hoped Aang wouldn't have to fight him, but if it came to that. The wind shifted. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the village, like trees bending under pressure. Aang stood on a rooftop that creaked beneath his weight. Beside him, Naruto landed silently, Samahata resting on his back like the jagged shadow of a beast. The wind had shifted, heavy, unnatural, crawling along the ground like it was carrying something old and angry. And then it came. Bei. Not as a spirit protector, not as the panda-like guardian Naruto once remembered. This thing was twisted, towering and grotesque. Its fur was scorched in patches, dripping black mist like tar. Four arms hung from its hulking frame, two massive and gorilla-like, dragging clawed fingers through the earth, and two smaller ones curled and twitching from its ribs like deformities. Its face was stretched, panda-like in the vaguest sense, but its eyes were burning hollows, glowing with pale white fury. Its roar split the air, not just sound, but pressure. A force of grief and fury that sent tremors through the stone beneath their feet. The village below screamed into motion. Roofs exploded as the spirit's giant hands smashed down on homes, sending shards of wood and clay tiles flying in every direction. Earth cracked beneath its steps, cobbled streets torn up like paper. A merchant's cart was flung against a wall, bursting into splinters. People scattered like insects, too slow, too small. "Aang," Naruto called. "Try to reach it, now." Aang jumped down from the rooftop, hands raised. Bei, I'm the Avatar, I know you're angry, but we can help, just talk to us." The spirit didn't stop. It moved straight through a stone well, flattening it. A large pillar, once holding wind chimes, was torn from its foundation, thrown end over end until it crushed a stable nearby. Naruto stepped forward, gripping Samahata. Bei, it's me, do you remember, years ago, you protected the forests, kept balance, what happened to you? Bei turned, just for a moment. Its mouth opened, rows of unnatural teeth bared, and it let out a deep, otherworldly howl that sent a ripple through the world. The sky above flickered like a storm cloud was forming, not in the sky, but between the worlds. Then, without pause, it stormed forward again, its claws tearing grooves into the earth. Naruto's brow furrowed. Something's wrong, he's not even here, not fully, it's like, he's caught in between. Aang ran alongside the spirit. "Please, whatever happened to you, we can fix it, just tell us what's wrong." Bei roared again and swept one arm across the town square. The ground exploded. A line of huts shattered like sandcastles, rooftops hurled into the air. A support beam nearly struck Aang, who barely ducked in time. "We have to do something," Aang shouted. Naruto called back, jumping to another roof, trying to get ahead of the beast. "Just, don't lose hope yet." Aang leapt higher, reaching a watchtower. "I know you don't want to hurt people, I know this isn't you, just talk to me." Bei paused at the base of the tower. For one breath, the spirit stopped. Naruto's heart skipped, that's it. Then Bei let out a spine-rattling shriek, one that cracked windows, and with a brutal upward swipe, tore through the base of the tower. The structure exploded in an instant. Dust and debris fired into the air like cannon smoke. Aang was thrown from the top. And Naruto barely had time to react. Heibei's other massive arm struck the wall beneath Naruto's perch, hard. The entire building cracked and split apart like a log in a fire. Naruto's eyes widened, he tried to leap back, but it was too late. The shockwave hit first. A thunderous wave of raw force blasted through the air, knocking the breath from his lungs. Then he felt his feet leave the roof, his body flipping through the air before colliding hard against a stone courtyard. Pain exploded across his side. He hit again, then again, rolling until he finally landed in the ash and dust. Aang's scream echoed as he landed roughly nearby, trying to scramble toward Naruto. Naruto! The world twisted, faded. Naruto could barely keep his eyes open. The last thing he saw before the black overtook him was Heibei's monstrous figure walking away, dragging broken wood and stone behind him like it was nothing. Then, nothing, no pain, no sound. Only a familiar, cold emptiness. A corner of his mind that hadn't opened in a while. And in the silence, something stirred. Something waiting. It's been a while since I've smelled your chakra, boy. The voice slid through the dark like smoke, low, guttural, thick with old hatred and raw weight. It didn't echo. It pressed, against his skin, against his thoughts. Naruto shivered. He knew that voice. His breath slowed, ears ringing in the silence that followed. Where was he? He couldn't see anything. Not Appa, not the village, not Aang, only black. Am I, in my head, why now, why here? You're not going to speak, the voice growled again. After sealing me in your gut, then sealing yourself away for centuries, nothing, not even a hello? I thought you wanted something, but no. You're still the same stubborn brat. Naruto grit his teeth. The fox, the demon sealed inside him. The monster he had spent years pushing down, containing, avoiding, hoping never to hear again. But here it was. He turned slowly, and two eyes met his own, burning gold, glowing in the dark like stars in a pit. No face, no body, just presence, rage barely chained. You brought me here, Naruto asked. His voice was low, unreadable, but his shoulders were tense. A sharp, growling laugh followed. It shook the air. The ground, if there was any, trembled like water. I didn't bring you here, you were dragged here. Your body is hurt, you were knocked unconscious, your mind, retreated, and this is where it came. Deep down, the beast said, you always come back to me. Naruto's fists clenched. Shut up, he said, voice flat. I should have ended you, when I had the chance. Back then, during the convergence, I should have destroyed you. Instead, I sealed you. And lost everything. His words slipped out sharper than expected. He blinked. I didn't mean to say that out loud. The fox chuckled, slow and cruel. That's the thing about being here, boy, down here in your own mind, you don't get to lie. Not to me, not even to yourself. Naruto looked away. Face shadowed. His fists trembled at his sides. It doesn't matter, he said at last. Whatever could have happened, I wouldn't trade the people I fight for now. Even if I can't destroy you. Hurtful, the fox replied mockingly. But your choice. It stepped forward, or maybe it didn't. It felt closer now, voice thicker, heavier in his chest. But now, I think I'll do the talking. You've been out of touch for too long, you've forgotten what I am. What it means to carry me inside you. But I think it's time you remembered. Naruto scowled. What makes you think I'll lose control? I've handled worse than, you think this is about control, the voice boomed. You're already breaking. You were knocked into a wall, you're bleeding on the ground, you blacked out. You're slipping. You will lose control, and when you do, everyone out there dies. Naruto's eyes widened, his chest tightened. Aang, he can handle himself, Katara and Sokka, they're safe, back in the wrong again, the voice interrupted, glee rising in its tone. Your loud-mouthed friend ran straight into the fight the moment you fell. Sokka, Naruto whispered. Yes, all bark that one, but loyal, so very loyal. He dove in to protect the Avatar, brave, stupid. And now, they're all alone, and that spirit, it's not the one you remember. Naruto collapsed to one knee, vision shaking. The dark pressed closer. His breath came short. The pressure, inside, outside, all around, was too much. Like he was underwater, sinking slowly through something heavy and cold. Bei was kind once, he thought, faintly. What happened to you? You're weak, boy, the voice growled again, closer now, deeper. And if you don't break, they'll all fall before morning. Naruto clutched at his chest, burning. His hands trembled. And then, he felt nothing. Not pain, not breath, not ground. Just emptiness. Everything faded, until even his anger was a ghost. And the blackness swallowed him whole. Katara didn't hesitate. The moment Sokka took off, she was right behind him, feet pounding over splintered stone and scorched dirt. Lungs burning with every breath. The village was falling apart around them, buildings crumbling and dust clouding the air like fog, but she couldn't stop. Not while her brother was running headfirst into something none of them truly understood. He's going to get himself killed. The thought was sharp, terrifying. But she bit down on it, she had to stay calm, she had to. For him, for Aang, for Naruto. She sprinted past a split rooftop, ducked under a crashing beam, and followed the unmistakable sound of fire meeting stone. Bei's monstrous roars echoed off what remained of the buildings, and when she broke through the smoke, she saw them. Aang darted through the air in fast spirals, using gusts of wind to push Bei back, at least a little. Every burst of air made the spirit stagger, but only for a second. The beast was massive, its fur like charred ink, bones and tusks jutting through black and white patches of swirling spirit matter. Its eyes glowed white-hot like coals, and the ground cracked beneath every step it took. Sokka was down low, trying to draw its attention, dodging wildly, barely missing a heavy claw that slammed into the ground behind him with enough force to split the earth. Katara's heart stopped. Sokka, she yelled, sprinting faster. A tendril of smoke-like energy lashed out near him, and Sokka rolled to the side, but not without cost. He landed hard, gritting his teeth and staggering back against a broken wall. She reached him just in time, dropping to her knees and pulling him up by his arms. What the hell were you thinking? She gasped. Sokka winced, trying to smile. I needed to help. Aang and Naruto, they can't do this alone. You almost got killed, she snapped, eyes wide. He shrugged with a groan, still breathing. Katara shook her head, lowering him carefully to lean against the stone wall behind him. His arms were scraped and bruised, and he was clearly pushing himself just to stay upright. Even his breath was uneven, like every inhale hurt. Spirits, fighting them isn't like anything else. You don't just swing a weapon or throw a wave. They don't move like people. They don't bleed. They just destroy. You should stay here, she said softly. Let me find the others. Sokka gave a weak nod, barely able to raise his head. Katara stood, scanning the field, and then she remembered. Where's Naruto? Her voice cracked slightly. I saw him get hit, Sokka said, breath rough. I think he slammed into the wall near the big building. Should be fine though, I mean, it's Naruto, he's made of stone or something. But his voice faded a little at the end, his confidence visibly shaking. That hit looked bad. Katara didn't wait. She turned, racing through the ruined village. Every structure she passed had crumbled halfway, and black smoke stained the sky overhead. When she reached the place Sokka described, her stomach dropped. Naruto was there. Collapsed, unmoving. His cloak was torn. Blood crusted on his temple. Samahata floated in the air near him, circling his body slowly in protective spirals like a nervous beast guarding its den. No, Katara knelt beside him, heart thundering. She didn't waste time, gently rolling him over, checking his chest for breath, pressing fingers to his neck. He's alive, but why won't he wake up? Come on, she whispered, pressing her hand over his heart. You're the strongest person I know, Naruto, don't do this. But then, the air changed. His skin grew hot, too hot. Wah, she started, drawing her hand back as steam began to rise from his skin. Samahata hissed and backed away slightly, a low growl rumbling from deep within the sword. Samahata, Katara whispered, but even the spirit didn't seem to understand what was happening. Naruto's body jerked once. And then it glowed, bright red chakra pouring from his pores like wildfire, dancing around him in ribbons of raw energy. The air warped from the heat. Katara scrambled backward, eyes wide. What is this? The chakra took shape, a skeletal frame of red energy snapped into place around him, fox-like, terrifying. 2 long ears. 9 flickering tails. And eyes that glowed a menacing red. His whisker marks deepened. His nails twisted into claws. He grinned. But it wasn't Naruto's smile. It was wrong, wild, predatory. Naruto, Katara whispered, barely able to say the name. No answer. He dropped to all fours, sniffing the earth like a bloodhound, the chakra bending and shifting with each motion. His body was coiled like a spring. And then, bam! He was gone in a blink, moving faster than she could track. A whisper of wind hit her face, and suddenly, he was right in front of her, crouched low, glowing red eyes boring into her soul. Katara froze. Her breath caught. She couldn't move, couldn't even raise a hand. The chakra looked at her. It knew her. And for the briefest second, she thought she saw Naruto inside that thing. But just as suddenly, he vanished again. Leaving nothing but wind, steam, and the scorch mark on the stone where he had stood. Katara sank to her knees. What just happened? And far in the distance, Heibei roared again. Katara stumbled back into the broken village square, her limbs still trembling, breath shallow. She tried to hold herself together, but the images of Naruto, his twisted chakra, those crimson eyes, the primal way he moved, lingered in her mind like shadows that wouldn't fade. She spotted Aang still holding off Heibei. The spirit roared again, another furious scream that split the sky. His claws smashed into a stone pillar, shattering it like it was nothing. Aang flung a gust of wind to push the beast back, spinning in midair, sweat dripping down his brow. Samahata had returned, coiled anxiously beside the shattered steps of the Elders' building. Katara knelt beside the spirit sword, placing her hand on its scales. It's okay, she whispered. We'll figure this out, he's still in there, he has to be. Samahata gave a low, uneasy hum. And then, a shockwave. Naruto appeared. Red chakra streaked across the sky like a comet before slamming into Heibei with thunderous force, sending the guardian spirit flying into a mound of rubble. The impact blew dust and fire into the air, and Katara threw her arm up to shield her eyes. When she looked again, Naruto wasn't human anymore. He moved in lunges, spine arched like a wolf, claws tearing into stone and spirit flesh alike. Each swipe left trails of burning red chakra behind, the air distorting around his limbs. His chakra tails whipped behind him, smashing rooftops. Snarls rumbled from deep in his chest, low, guttural, and utterly inhuman. Heibei fought back, rushing him with claws and spiritual force, but he was losing. Naruto tore through the spirit's attacks with reckless fury, his movement chaotic but precise. At one point, he tackled the spirit clean through a burning tower, reducing it to splinters. They weren't just fighting, they were tearing the village apart. What is he? A voice murmured next to her. Katara turned to see Aang land beside her, glider retracting. His eyes were wide with disbelief as they stared at the two monsters. What happened to Naruto? Aang asked. Katara shook her head slowly, eyes locked on the red blur lashing out across the battlefield. I don't know, 1 second he was unconscious, the next he was this. It was the truth. And yet it barely scratched the surface of everything they didn't know. Aang swallowed. He's hurting Bei a lot. If this keeps up, Bei won't survive. Katara nodded, voice tight, then you need to stop him. Before he does something he can't take back. Aang looked at her one last time. I will, just keep Sokka safe. She gave him a small nod. Aang leapt into the air, bending a powerful updraft to vault himself toward the two beasts. His wind slammed between them, forcing them apart just enough to interrupt their exchange. Naruto growled and whipped his head around, eyes locking on Aang, but didn't attack, yet. Katara didn't have time to watch. She turned and rushed back to Sokka, still slumped against the wall, coughing as dust fell around them. Sokka, she called, kneeling down. I'm okay, he muttered, grimacing. You're not though, you look like you've seen a ghost. Something worse, she said softly, helping him sit up straighter. She tore strips from her outer sleeve and began wrapping the worst of his bruises. The ground trembled around them, more destruction from the clash happening behind her, but for a moment, she focused on him, on helping, on staying present. But then, a shadow loomed over them. A claw the size of a cart reached from the smoke. Bei. In one clean movement, he grabbed Katara, talons closing around her like iron bars. Sokka, she screamed as the spirit yanked her from the ground. No, Katara, he lunged, but stumbled. His body was too weak, too slow. The spirit vanished back into the forest, bounding away with massive leaps, Katara's screams fading into the trees. A massive roar shook the ruins behind them. Aang turned midair. Naruto. But he didn't need to say anything. Naruto had already stopped. His monstrous red form twisted toward the direction Bei had gone. His eyes locked on the path carved through the trees. His chakra flared, violent and alive. And he vanished. Aang gave chase immediately, glider snapping open behind him, the air rushing past his ears like a scream. He soared above the trees, wind trailing his glider, keeping his eyes locked on the trail of torn earth and crushed branches left in the spirit's wake. But his gaze kept shifting, again and again, to Naruto. The boy wasn't running. He was ripping through the forest, chakra tails carving trenches in the dirt, claws dragging like blades. Leaves caught fire in his wake. Ash followed his steps. And the look on his face. That wasn't Naruto. What are you? Aang's thoughts twisted, full of questions he had no answers to. He had known Naruto was powerful, strange, secretive. But this wasn't jutsu, at least he didn't think it was. Was this still chakra that Naruto spoke of? It felt different. A living force inside him. A beast. The trees cleared suddenly, and they were there. At the edge of a dead grove. The earth turned black. Charred, cracked. And in the center stood an old statue, a crumbling depiction of a peaceful, sitting panda. Its face had been worn by time, moss growing over its carved fur. They had entered the heart of the forest. Katara was gone. Bei vanished between the trees. Naruto stopped, chakra flickering. Aang landed hard beside him, panting, Katara. Where is she? Naruto didn't answer. He just stared at the statue, growling low, like something buried in his memories had surfaced. But his fury hadn't faded. If anything, it was only growing. The forest was still now. Too still. Aang looked at Naruto, really looked, the boy still crouched low, shoulders tense, red chakra bleeding and writhing off his frame like a living thing. His back was toward him, but Aang could feel it, that this wasn't just fury or instinct. This was deeper. Internal. A battle being fought behind those glowing eyes. What are you fighting, Naruto? Aang's chest rose slowly, steadying his breath. The energy around Naruto pulsed in waves, more like spirit than bending. He didn't understand it, but he could feel it. And for once, that was enough. He stepped forward. Naruto, he asked softly. Naruto's head snapped toward him, eyes burning, mouth twisted in a snarl. He lunged without warning. Aang barely had time to flip back, wind circling around him instinctively. Naruto crashed into the ground where he'd stood, claws raking across the dirt and stone. His chakra flared violently, distorting the air with heat. He doesn't even see me right now. But Aang didn't run. He waited. When Naruto came again, faster this time. Aang planted his staff and spun with the wind, flipping over Naruto's shoulder. He landed behind him, eyes narrowing. Then, he focused. A sudden calm surged through Aang's body, a current unlike airbending or anything else he'd learned. It came from somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. His markings began to glow softly. Not the pure white of the avatar state, but a cool, deep blue, spiritual. He didn't command the energy. He simply let it be. And then, he released it. The blue aura flared out from him in a pulse, hitting Naruto like a wave. The red chakra buckled, resisting violently, but only for a moment. Then it cracked, sputtered, and shattered like glass. Naruto collapsed to one knee. Breathing hard, smoke curling from his body. The red light was gone. Aang, he croaked. His voice sounded human again. Naruto lifted his head slowly, strands of hair clinging to his face with sweat. What happened? Aang stepped closer, staff still in hand but now lowered. You tell me, he said. You turned into some kind of chakra monster. Naruto's eyes widened. He blinked, the memories hit him like a stone drop into water, the spirit's attack, the heat, the fury, the voice in the dark. He remembered it all. His head dipped, shame falling over his face. It's something I've been dealing with, he muttered. Something I didn't want to tell anyone yet. Aang's brows furrowed. Naruto. Naruto raised a hand slightly. I can't explain all of it, not yet. But I can say this, it's a kind of chakra. One that doesn't belong to me. He looked away, hands curling into fists. It's sealed inside of me. And I can't control it. It took over when I blacked out. Aang was silent for a moment. But then his voice sharpened, pained. Katara's gone, Naruto. Bei took her. That thing inside you, it didn't save her. It only caused more destruction. Naruto flinched, but Aang saw the way his face tightened. He looked so human. Vulnerable. Like a boy who had been holding everything in until it cracked. I didn't mean, Aang started, but Naruto waved him off. No, Naruto said. You're right. I should have said something. I've been hiding too much for too long. I wanted to protect people from it, not endanger them. You're not wrong for it, Aang said suddenly. Naruto looked up at him, surprised. Aang looked off into the trees, voice softer now. When I first found out I was the Avatar, I didn't tell Katara or Sokka right away. Not because I didn't trust them. But because everything changed. It was too big. Too heavy. He turned back to Naruto. You're going through something. I can tell. Maybe it's not the same, but you've been carrying it alone, trying to figure out how to handle it yourself. I get that. I do. Naruto said nothing at first. Just looked down, jaw clenched, but, Aang continued, when we hide things like that, they don't go away, they grow. And if we're not careful, they hurt the people around us. Naruto exhaled slowly, finally nodding. I know. The silence stretched for a moment, broken only by the distant wind and the crackle of scorched leaves. Naruto glanced around. Where even are we? Aang blinked. I was following Heibei, and then you, I don't really know. Naruto turned slowly. He walked a few steps, then stopped. Wait. Aang moved beside him as Naruto pointed forward. They both froze. Across the clearing, partially hidden behind the ashen trees, were their bodies. Still. Unmoving. Lying on the blackened ground exactly where the two of them had been standing. What? Aang breathed. Naruto looked at his hand. It glowed faintly orange now, crackling with quiet chakra like firelight. Aang's skin shimmered with the same blue he had felt earlier when calming Naruto. Naruto's voice came quiet, serious. I don't think we're in the physical world anymore. Aang's eyes widened as he stared down at his unconscious body, the truth settling over him like a heavy mist. This can't be real, he muttered, looking to Naruto, then to the faintly glowing energy that clung to his fingers. How is this even possible? His thoughts were racing. Trying to find logic, some sort of explanation. Was this just a dream, a hallucination? No, it felt real, too real. The air didn't taste like air, and the trees didn't rustle with wind, they moved with something else, like thought, like emotion. Naruto, meanwhile, had gone still. He sat down cross-legged near the statue of the ruined panda, his chakra aura dimming into a quiet orange pulse that flickered like an ember. It was almost jarring, how quickly he seemed to settle again. Aang blinked. You're not freaking out? Naruto looked up at him with a dry, tired smirk. Freaking out won't help. Besides, he glanced up at the darkened sky. I've been here before, not here specifically, but close enough to know when I'm not in the normal world. He looked over at Aang now, his voice calm but honest. This is the spirit world. Aang stiffened. What? Naruto nodded, slowly standing. It explains why we can see our bodies, why we don't feel tired, why time feels like it stopped moving. But, how are we supposed to get back? Aang asked, rubbing the back of his head as his eyes scanned the strange, dreamlike forest. Katara's still missing, Sokka's alone, Heibei, he's still out there. And now we're here. Naruto frowned. Yeah, and we don't have a guide, not good. He turned his eyes back toward the scorched path leading away from the panda statue. His brows furrowed. It's risky walking the spirit world without help. Not all spirits are friendly. Some don't even know you're human, and others don't care. There was a pause before Aang's eyes flicked to him. Wait, he said. If this is the spirit world, then maybe, he paused, his eyes lighting with a sudden clarity, maybe I can contact Avatar Roku. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, watching the way Aang's whole posture seemed to shift. Less fear, more focus. You think so? Naruto asked. It makes sense, doesn't it? Aang said, starting to pace slightly. Roku's a past avatar, he's a spirit now, right, so if I'm in the spirit world, maybe I can finally talk to him, like Getzo said I would. Naruto folded his arms, thinking. That might actually work. He brought a hand to his chin. I don't know the specifics, but spirits do come to guide people sometimes. Especially the avatar, so it's possible. They both paused, until a sudden gust of wind rolled through the trees, followed by a strange, melodic rumble. Aang turned around, and his breath caught in his throat. A glowing dragon, long, serpentine, and ethereal, emerged from the haze of mist that shimmered through the ruined forest. It moved like moonlight, elegant and massive, before landing several feet from them in silence. Its scales shimmered with red and gold, and its eyes glowed with a familiar warmth. Both boys stood wary at first. Naruto immediately shifted into a ready stance, hand twitching near where Samehada might form. "Friend or foe," he muttered. But Aang didn't move. He gasped instead, eyes wide. "Wait, I've seen this dragon before." Naruto looked at him sideways. Aang stared at the creature with wonder in his eyes, and then it clicked. A vision, brief, vague, something he'd felt before, back when he touched Roku's statue. "This dragon," Aang whispered, "I saw him with Roku, it's his guide, his animal companion." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "That makes some sense, feels old, powerful." The dragon lowered its massive head gently, its breath glowing in faint puffs of golden mist. It made no move to attack, just waited, watching Aang. "Do you think it can take you to him?" Naruto asked. "I think so," Aang said, staring into the dragon's eyes. Naruto took a step back, letting his arms fall to his sides, then go. Aang turned to him, "What about you?" Naruto looked past him, toward the shadowed tree line. "I'll figure out how to wake up, meet back with Sokka. Tell him what happened, let him know you're okay." Aang hesitated, searching Naruto's face. "But, are you sure?" he asked. "You were just, that red chakra thing, you could still be." "I'll be fine," Naruto said, cutting him off gently. "I'm in control now, you're the one who needs answers." The boy nodded. He turned toward the dragon, climbing up gently onto its back. It didn't resist, it simply rose slowly, lifting into the dark sky like a dream taking flight. Aang gave one last look down at Naruto. "I'll find him." "I know you will," Naruto said. And with that, the dragon vanished into the clouds, leaving Naruto alone again in the strange world between thought and spirit. He sighed, cracking his neck as he turned toward the deeper woods. Time to figure out how to wake up. The morning mist was still clinging to the tree tops when Naruto stirred. His breath came slow at first, foggy in the early dawn. His eyes blinked open not in alarm, but in quiet awareness, as if his body had decided, without permission, that it was time to return. He sat up. A faint pressure still lingered in his chest, a hollow ache deep in his muscles where spirit and rage had briefly collided. But it was over now, at least, for the moment. Rising to his feet, Naruto shook the ash from his sleeves, then reached out to brush his hand against the wall of the burned-down temple behind him, cold, charred, real. The spirit world was behind him, he was back. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the village. By the time he approached the battered front gate, the sun had begun its slow crawl into the sky, a pale light stretching over the soot-stained rooftops. The wind was soft, quiet, everything felt quieter than it should have. Waiting at the gate, just outside the threshold, was Sokka. He looked exhausted, his stance a little slouched, his eyes ringed with sleepless worry, but the second he saw Naruto emerge from the tree-line, he straightened. "You're awake," he said, not quite hiding his relief. Naruto nodded once, slowing his pace. "Did you find her?" Sokka asked, voice sharp and direct. "Did you find Katara?" Naruto stopped, standing a few feet from him. He shook his head. But before Sokka could react, Naruto spoke. "Aang's in the spirit world," he said calmly. "He's looking for help, answers. We have to trust him." Sokka opened his mouth to argue, but Naruto held his gaze steadily. "He hasn't let us down yet," Naruto added. That gave Sokka pause. He glanced away, lips thinning. "No, I guess he hasn't." Naruto stepped past the gate, and Sokka walked alongside him in silence for a moment. The village was still quiet, people inside, recovering. They passed the charred remnants of the southern well, a broken cart half buried in ash. Then, finally, Sokka asked, "Back there, what you became?" Naruto didn't look at him. "I'll explain it one day," he said, his voice low. Honest. But firm. Just not now. Sokka blinked. That wasn't like Naruto. Usually, he gave half-truths, hints and vague nods. But this was different, this was a boundary. A real one. Alright, Sokka muttered after a beat. You've earned that, I guess. Naruto just gave a faint smile, then walked ahead. Eventually, the others drifted off to sleep or to the ruins of their homes. But Naruto didn't stop. He made his way to the far edge of the village, where the trees had not yet recovered and the land still smelled like smoke. A small, abandoned clearing, no people, no footsteps. Just space. That's what he needed. Silence. He dropped to his knees, staring down at the ground, his mind reaching backward, to what had happened, to what he had become. To the rage, the heat, the voice. The fox. It hadn't taken full control, no. But it had broken through. Used the pain, the chaos, and the people he cared about to twist his will. Sokka, Katara, Aang. The memory of their faces during the fight flashed across his mind. The fear in Katara's voice. Aang's desperate shout, Sokka's silent worry at the gate. They were cracks in the armor he had built. And the fox knew how to find them. He stared at the scorched earth, at his own shadow, at the faint wisps of steam that still seemed to curl around his skin. What do I do? He wanted control, needed it, not just for himself, but to protect the people he was starting to care about again. He closed his eyes, and her voice came back to him. Katara's voice. You keep everything to yourself, Naruto, it's like you're always trying to carry something alone. He had brushed it off at the time. Now it echoed too loudly to ignore. He thought about it deeply, how much they already knew. That he had killed, that he had been feared, and still probably is. That his power was something no one else had, they knew, and they didn't run. But this was different. If they knew what lived inside him, if they saw it again, would they still look at him the same way? His hands clenched in the dirt. Would they see the person, or the monster? Would Katara? He exhaled shakily, head bowing low. He was scared. For all his strength and wisdom and quiet discipline, Naruto was still 13. A boy who had grown up too fast, carved into a warrior by war and pain and the weight of something primal sleeping in his gut. He liked who he was now, calm, capable, collected. But he knew, deep down, that not facing the truth was hurting him. He'd always known. And when the time came, when he could finally face what happened before he was sealed, and the blood that stained the years after he woke, then, and only then, would he tell them everything. Because they deserved to know. Because they had trusted him. And because, maybe, they'd still accept him. But first, he had to learn how to accept it himself. So he sat there, quiet, until the sun rose fully over the hills. And for once, he let himself feel the weight of it all, without pushing it away. Night had settled like a soft shroud across the quiet village by the time Naruto finally moved again. He'd stayed alone for hours, letting the stillness settle into his bones. Watching the moon rise. Listening to nothing. Feeling everything. But when Appa's low bellow echoed above the rooftops, Naruto stood, brushing the ash from his sleeves once more. Aang was back. The boy landed gently, his glider folding behind him, feet touching down in the same spot Naruto had returned to the day before. His eyes were focused, quiet, but not burdened. He looked calmer now, resolved. You found a way, Naruto asked, eyes narrow with interest but voice low. Aang nodded once, I did, I know how to stop Hebei now. There was confidence in his tone, but not arrogance, understanding. Like he'd seen something deeper. Naruto's gaze lingered, spiritually connecting with Hebei, he thought, and gave the smallest nod to himself. That tracks, I wasn't far off. They didn't have long to wait. Not much later, Hebei reappeared, rising from the far edge of the tree line like a storm in motion, all wild limbs and black fury. The monster barely acknowledged them again, just as before. It moved toward the village's largest structure, dragging the wind behind its enormous weight. Naruto didn't move, he simply watched. But Aang stepped forward. And this time, instead of yelling or fighting or blocking, Aang leapt up, his glider closed, and placed a hand gently on Heibei's twisted forehead. Naruto narrowed his eyes, watching closely as Aang's expression changed. The boy's brows lifted in understanding, and then his mouth parted. "That explains it," Aang said softly, then louder, "You're the guardian of that forest, the one the Fire Nation burned down." Naruto's eyes widened, the realization crashing in like a tide. Of course. The scarred land they'd flown over, the trees, torched, the ash, the acorns. Heibei had protected that place, had loved it, and now it was gone. Aang pulled a small acorn from his pocket and held it out, his voice steady. "My friends told me something when I was sad too. This," he looked at the seed, then back at the spirit, "means the forest will grow back. One day, it'll be even bigger than before." Heibei stilled. His monstrous claws trembled, and he slowly extended one of his smaller arms, taking the acorn delicately from Aang's palm. Naruto watched, breath still, as the spirit shimmered, black and white light folding inward like wine through cloth, and then, suddenly, he was no longer a monster. The old form returned. A panda spirit, tall, solemn, gentle. Heibei turned, starting toward the edge of the village, but stopped. Right in front of Naruto. For a moment, neither moved. There was no hostility, just something unspoken, a kind of peace. Then the spirit faded, not into nothing, but into a quiet storm of drifting bamboo leaves, swirling like a soft breeze. And from within them, Katara emerged, along with the other villagers that were taken. Delirious, barefoot, her water tribe clothing dusted with spirit world haze. Samahata still clung to her shoulder, resting gently against her neck like a guardian that had never left her side. Sokka let out a strangled breath and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her in a fierce, relieved hug. Katara blinked in confusion. What happened? Naruto and Aang arrived beside them, smiles breaking across their faces like light through clouds. "You were pulled into the spirit world," Aang explained gently. "But you're safe now." Naruto tilted his head. "How do you feel?" He added dryly, "Because I don't think your brother's able to ask, he's currently smothering you." Katara raised a brow at Sokka, who was still clinging to her, and smirked. "I'm fine, shouldn't you be the one asking him that?" Sokka realized what he was doing, quickly pulling back with a huff. "I'm fine too, thanks for asking," he muttered. Naruto let out a low chuckle and walked over to take Samahata from her shoulder. The living blade growled softly, then coiled closer around Naruto's back, brushing her scales against his cheek affectionately. He gave her a fond scratch, smiling faintly. Then he turned back to Aang. "You never said," Naruto began, "how you figured it out. The connection. What did you do in there?" Aang looked thoughtful. "Roku's dragon, he showed me a few things when I was trying to find Roku. Even though I didn't actually meet him, his dragon was always there." He looked at his glider for a moment. "So, I just did what the dragon did. How it connected with me, I copied that." Naruto nodded slowly, arms folding. "Clever." But then Aang's expression shifted. He frowned, gaze darkening, something heavy crossing over his face. "There's something else," he said quietly. Naruto's eyes narrowed. "What?" Aang hesitated, then looked at him with something bordering on worry. "I didn't just see the dragon," he said. "I saw something else." "What did you see?" Aang exhaled. "I saw how to contact Roku, but where we need to go to do so, is in the Fire Nation." That's it for today. I hoped you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, all Kage, out.